Number 6. The crew of the Sarah Joe. The Sarah Joe was a 17-foot motorboat that at the time 20-something-year-old Robert Mulakany acquired in the 1970s. He named it after his mom Sarah and dad Joe. The boat took 5 strong, healthy young men out to sea 40 years ago, and it wasn't until more than a decade later that their boat was found on the shores of one of the smallest of the Marshall Islands. But the men were not with the boat. Oddly enough, there was a shallow grave that contained the bones of one of the fishermen, but no other clues or signs of life. To make their disappearance stranger, oceanographers estimated that it would have only taken the boat about 3 months to drift onto the island, which means the boat, grave, or remaining crew should have been there when a government survey of the island took place in 1983, but they weren't. So we may never actually know what happened to the Sarah Joe and her crew for the 4 years between the disappearance and the survey of the island. Number 5. The missing lighthouse keepers. There was once an isolated island off the coast of Scotland where 3 lighthouse keepers lived and were responsible for keeping the building intact. One day when their monthly supply ship dropped in, the island was silent, no response from the lighthouse keepers. Eventually the captain and some crew members went to investigate and found the suspiciously empty lighthouse. 2 of the 3 waterproof coats were missing from their hangars, and the kitchen was left in a state as if people left in a hurry. The lighthouse log only added one mystery to the situation. The log described how one of the keepers wouldn't talk, and the other continuously cried for hours. All of this pain and fear seemed to be coming from what was referred to as a powerful storm looming in the distance. However, this begs the question, why were they so scared of a simple storm? They should have been safe in the brand new lighthouse, right? The log goes on to talk about how they all sat close together and prayed for the storm to be over. The final log states the storm has passed, the skies are calm, and God is over all. Their bodies were never found, and the cause of their deaths are still a mystery to this day. The most accepted theory is that they somehow got swept out to sea during the storm, never to be seen again. But one final detail remains, one that scared the captain and his crew to the bone. The powerful storm described in the log didn't exist. There were no storms reported in the area. In fact, the skies were calm all day. Number 4. The death of Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Both girls went on a study abroad trip to Panama, where they went missing on a hike. After several weeks, some of their remains were found miles up the river from where they began their hike, along with a backpack that contained their belongings. The creepy part of it is that a camera in their backpack started out with pictures that they took of each other hiking, and then suddenly goes into over 100 pictures of what appeared to be nighttime pictures of rocks near a riverbed, the back of someone's head, and just pure blackness. The dark pictures appeared to be taken many days after they went missing. There's a lot of theories as to why they went missing, what finally ended their lives, and why they were taking pictures, but there's no solid answer. According to their cell phone use records, they had been alive in the forest for days after they got lost, trying to get a signal from their phones to call emergency help. Number 3. The death of Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson was found rolled up in wrestling mats in Lowndes High School, and his death was ruled an accident. The official story is that he was reaching into the rolled-up wrestling mats to get his shoe and got stuck and died. An initial autopsy concluded that the death was accidental, and Johnson's family wasn't happy with that, so they had an independent autopsy performed. This second autopsy showed that he died from blunt force trauma, and there's actually blood in many of the crime scene photos. People believe the conspiracy between the school and police is keeping a lot of information from the family. Video footage from the gym during the time of his death is missing, which makes this mystery all the more unsettling. Number 2. The disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy was an American citizen who went missing during a Caribbean cruise on the Royal Caribbean Rhapsody of the Seas. On the morning of March 24, 1998, Amy had been drinking in the dance club with the ship's band Blue Orchid. One of the band's members, Alistair Douglas, known as Yellow, said he parted with Amy at about 1 a.m. Sometime between 5:15 and 5:30, Amy's father Ron saw her asleep on the deck. When he got up at 6 a.m., she was no longer there. There were possible sightings of Amy in Curacao in 1998 and 1999. 2 Canadian tourists reported seeing a woman resembling Amy on the beach in 1998. The woman's tattoos were allegedly identical to Amy's. A member of the Navy said he saw Amy in a brothel in 1999, and he claimed she told him that her name was Amy Bradley and that she begged him for help. There was another potential sighting in 2005. when the witness claimed she was seen in a department store restroom in Barbados. Amy's mother and father appeared on an episode of Dr. Phil. An image of a young woman resembling Amy that was emailed to her parents was shown on the show, and it suggests that she may have been sold into sex slavery. And number 1, the disappearance of Kenny Veach. Kenny Veach was a well-experienced hiker in Nevada who found a cave he described as the M Cave, as it was opened in the shape of an M. He claimed he heard very unusual noises from the cave and found it suspicious, as it was located 6 miles south of a top-secret airbase. As he began to enter the cave, he claimed his whole body began to vibrate. The more he went into the cave, the worse the vibrating became. He said he suddenly became very afraid and hightailed it out of there. He recorded another trip to find the cave again and catch it on video, but this video ended up being a bust. He later went back to where he found the cave again and has not been seen since. His phone was found in an abandoned mine entrance, but no body or evidence that he had gone down into the mine. He posted this video about the cave a few days before he went missing.
And I'm looking for a cave that I found, and I didn't have a sidearm when I was here before, and something about that cave just spooked me. Out of all the caves I've ever gone in, this one just made my body vibrate. The closer I got to it, the crazier my body felt, and I was like, all right, I'm not gonna go in there right now, but I'm coming back someday. And I talked to some people on YouTube, and I told them, hey, I'm coming out here, you know, because they kind of called my hand on it. So I don't know if there's going to be anything to it, but it might be interesting. If I can find it, I got to relocate it, and this is a big mountain range I'm in, and I'm on foot, you know. My truck's way out there. There's no roads, there's no trails. It's a pretty rough terrain. So hopefully I'll find it. It's shaped like a big M. It's a big cave that looks just like a gigantic M.
New Year's Eve is a holiday and occasion many people look forward to and use as motivation to pursue goals they usually wouldn't other times of the year. For many others, it's a day despised and resented. The following are 7 creepy things that happened on New Year's Eve, creating for some unsettling starts to New Year's. On New Year's Eve of 1920, the Drake Hotel in Chicago celebrated its opening night, which started with elegance but ended in tragedy. The Drake was expected to be one of the city's most beautiful and elegant hotels, but it ended in tragedy because it was the night a woman referred to as the Woman in Red ended her life. On this New Year's Eve day, a man and his fiancée, who was wearing a red silk gown, attended the gala held in the Drake's Gold Coast room. The man stepped away and did not return for over an hour, so his fiancée went looking for him. When she found him, he was accompanied with another woman whom he was showing attention to. The devastated woman climbed the roof and jumped to her death. Since then, guests at the Drake have reported seeing her apparition in the Gold Coast room, the Palm Court, and on the 10th floor, as well as the roof. People also still to this day allegedly report hearing a woman's cries on the 10th floor and on the roof. Some believe her soul is condemned to replay her final night, attempting to find peace with the final tragic chapter of her life. Workers and guests have also on numerous occasions reported getting a creepy, uncomfortable feeling in the ballroom. On New Year's Eve in 2013, a man named Joseph Scott was hosting a house party among his close friends. The party was going normal until a few different friends started asking Joe about the sounds coming from the ceiling. The party was being held in the living room, and the attic was right above the living room. Joseph went to the bedroom which had the attic door inside of it and pulled the attic door down. He did this without telling anyone so as to not make any of the guests uncomfortable, but after multiple comments about the noise, he couldn't just ignore it and have that lingering in his head. Upon checking the attic, Joseph heard a loud, distinct cracking sound from the other side, behind a wooden wall. He thought there might have been a raccoon up there, so he walked across the wooden boards of the attic, hearing his intoxicated friends down below in the living room laughing, asking, "What the hell is that noise?" When he got to the back section of the attic, which according to the layout was directly on top of the front door area of the living room, he saw somebody's hands wrapped around the top of a box, but their body wasn't visible. Joseph screamed as he was startled, but then he quickly assumed it was one of his friends. He went closer, and somebody who he didn't know popped their head out from behind the box. A middle-aged, angry-looking man. Joseph screamed bloody murder as he ran out of the attic yelling for his friends. He and his guy friends waited by the attic door guarding it while they waited for the police. Police were able to remove the man from the attic with ease. He was unarmed. The man didn't know anyone at the party, and he admitted to simply walking in during the party. He claimed he meant no wrongdoing. However, it's pretty likely he was planning on robbing the place when everyone was gone, or possibly worse. Similarly, with this one we have another party crashing type of story, as yet another uninvited guest somehow finds themselves in a random party. Only with this one, the guests seem to have materialized out of nowhere and joined the storyteller's New Year's Eve party. There was an older woman dressed in all white who was seen by most of the partygoers. All of the doors and windows were locked, and no one admitted to letting the old woman into the house. Being in a polite and festive mood, the hostess did not ask the lady in white to leave, but according to multiple party guests, the woman reported that she was lost and couldn't find the party she was actually heading to. Upon leaving the party, she dropped 2 scarves on the doorstep. To this day, nobody that was there at that party knows how she got in. To add to this mystery, the writer adds that her cousin saw the same woman in his dreams a few nights later. No one ever saw her again. This one was recounted by a young woman and her boyfriend. The two were cleaning up the boyfriend's place, getting ready to have people over for New Year's Eve. As the couple was cleaning, they kept losing things and finding them back in the same place a few minutes later. The couple thought that they were just imagining it at first, or that the other was moving the objects without them seeing, but it kept happening over and over, and every time they needed something, it would disappear. Eventually, company starts to arrive. Their friend Carson gets there first, and the three sit down and watch TV. That's when the boyfriend made a statement, and in return, an unknown man's voice said, "Right." The three of them looked around to see if the boyfriend's roommates had returned, but no one was there. Later, when the roommates did return, they told the couple and Carson that they had been hearing the same thing since the night of the recently passed eclipse. A while later, the woman went to the bathroom, and as she was washing her hands, she heard a loud cough right behind her ear. All of the hairs on her neck stood up as she ran out of there. At first, no one believed her, but when the rest of their company arrived, and they too eventually said that they heard a cough in the bathroom as well, it's not hard to tell why everyone believed her after that. The woman heard a cough in the bathroom one more time the next morning, but didn't hear anything again for a whole year, leading her to believe the strange occurrences only happen around the holidays. The Monte Vista Hotel in Flagstaff, Arizona opened on New Year's Day of 1927, and during the 1940s and 50s was a popular spot for Hollywood guests, and more than 100 Western movies were filmed nearby. Some of the guests of the hotel included Bing Crosby, Jane Russell, Gary Cooper, Spencer Tracy, and many others. There are many stories and legends of ghosts in this hotel, one of the more notable ones being the Phantom Bellboy, who knocks on doors and then vanishes. There have been dozens of guests over the years reporting that somebody would knock on their doors, then when they open them, nobody would be there. Alongside the bellboy is often what is believed to be a woman who has been seen multiple times outside of the suite that author Zane Grey stayed in, which, as it turns out, is a room in which 2 prostitutes had been murdered long ago. But there's more with this hotel. Multiple guests who have stayed in the room that actor Gary Cooper stayed in have reported hearing a man coughing and clearing his throat, pacing back and forth. Many guests have reported feeling unnerved by the distinct feeling that someone is watching them in that room. One of the last more notable paranormal phenomenons that have been reported in the hotel comes from the saloon. People believe a former bank robber haunts the saloon, as again multiple guests have heard a voice and sounds from people who weren't there, and report an uneasy feeling of being watched. Ellen Roberts, a hotel desk clerk, reported that in 1970, 3 men robbed a nearby bank and to celebrate stopped in our lounge for a drink, even though one of the men had been shot during their escape. While having his drink, the wounded man died, and some believe that he is the spirit that's haunting this area of the building. The hotel remains open to this day, and many people visit in hopes of encountering some paranormal activity. On New Year's Eve 1997, 2 friends Olivia Hope and Ben Smart were celebrating New Year's Eve and ran into trouble after their rental yacht that they planned to sleep on was overcrowded. They located a water taxi still operating and got on. Sharing the ride with them was a man who learned that they had nowhere to sleep and offered to let them stay on his boat. As this was their only real option, they accepted, and the taxi took them to the man's yacht. They climbed aboard the stranger's boat between 4 and 5 a.m. After that, the two friends were never seen again. The police conducted an investigation, and despite a number of witnesses describing the same man and the same two-masted sailing boat, they focused on a man with a smaller boat named Scott Watson. Where this crime case went from there has been a source of controversy ever since. Police are confident they got the man responsible for Ben and Olivia's disappearances and likely murders, but even 2 decades later, the mystery around this case remains. On New Year's Eve of 2017, a group of friends had went on a camping trip to the Acadia National Park in Maine. They had been planning a New Year's camping trip for a long time, and it finally came to fruition. The 6 friends were separated into 3 different tents. They set up camp on a riverbank and set up their portable barbecue and campfire. The group had also come prepared with a bunch of fireworks to shoot off at midnight. For a majority of their time at the campsite, the friends had music blasting on their portable speaker and were drinking tequila. As the group got more intoxicated and louder, one of the friends told everyone to quiet down for a second and lowered the music because he thought he could hear something in the woods. While the group was quiet, they heard it. It was this long and slow whistling sound that would echo every few seconds. One suggested it was an animal, one suggested it was someone whistling, and one suggested it was a literal whistle being blown by someone. When they were quiet for long enough, the sound stopped. Eventually the group resumed playing their music and drinking their drinks. When midnight came, the group began to shoot off their fireworks one at a time. After maybe 4 or 5 fireworks exploding, a blood-curdling scream came from the woods. The screams continued on and on. The group stopped shooting their fireworks and all jumped into their tents to hide, completely freaked out. The screaming stopped, but 3 of the 6 said they heard footsteps approach the campsite, and through the tent walls, reflecting through the glow of the campfire, they could see a very tall, hunched-over figure, ruling out the possibility of some small animal making the screaming sounds. It didn't stay long though. It disappeared along with the footsteps back into the woods. The group was so terrified they all communicated through their tents, not wanting to leave. They were simply too scared to even take the time to pack up and leave. They waited it out until the sun began to rise. Then the group packed up and they were on their way. Not the most desirable experience to start a new year.
I spent a solid weekend playing on the computer a few years ago, drinking a lot of ephedra and coffee and generally not sleeping much. Every so often I'd feel an itch on my arms, like a loose hair falling on them. I'd brush it off and go back to staring at the computer. As this itching was happening more frequently, I started wondering if I was just imagining things or delusional from the tea and insomnia. But then I noticed what appeared to be tiny spiders on my arms. Am I going crazy? Are these drug bugs or what? And I went back to the screen. Then I saw the strings of thin webs glistening in the light, and tiny spiders floating past my vision. They were real indeed. I noticed a hole in the ceiling where they appeared to be falling from. I blasted a can of wasp spray into the hole and hundreds of these little spiders began pouring out, streaming from their webs. Hundreds of them, all over me. I got home from work late one night, was walking onto my front stoop, when I walked right into this huge spider web. At first I didn't think much of it until I looked down, and saw about 20 to 30 baby spiders all over me. I started freaking out, then noticed the parents sitting on my door. They were huge, almost the size of a hand. So of course I didn't want to use the front door. I run to my back door, throw off all my clothes and jump in the shower. I then watch as the spiders began falling out of my hair. I got home late and my phone was about to die. I always plugged my phone into the outlet under my bed. I collapsed on my bed and reached my hand under my bed to try and find my phone's charger. But what I found instead was some kind of squishy sack. I began poking and squeezing it, when all of a sudden, I felt hundreds of little legs poking me and crawling up my arm. I pulled my arm up from under my bed and then screamed when I saw probably 30 baby spiders crawling up my arm. I shook them off, told my parents, and jumped in the shower right away. Turned out it was a baby spider sack, and there was an even bigger mother spider living under my bed. I awoke from my deep sleep in the middle of the night to the feeling of something huge crawling around in my bed. Still half asleep, I jumped out and started freaking out, assuming it was a spider or something. With one swift motion of bravery, I flung the covers off the bed, but nothing was there. I started to think that I was just feeling it as part of a dream, and I continued to feel it until I fully woke up, so I went back to sleep. The next night, I felt the same exact thing. I felt it on my arms this time instead of my legs. Again, I jumped out of bed, still not in the fully awake state of mind. I was again freaking out and ran to my parents' room to get my dad. He was never afraid of spiders. He came to my room and flung off the sheets and covers. There was nothing there. I was convinced at this point that it had something to do with my dreams, or something was wrong with me, because there was no spider in my bed whatsoever. However, the next night, it happened again. The feeling of something huge crawling on my arm. Freaking out again, in my half-awake, confused state of mind, I once again jumped out of bed and flung off the covers, but this time I was greeted by the sight of the biggest spider I'd ever seen. Bigger than a tarantula. It quickly crawled under my bed and out of sight as I screamed and went off to my parents' room again to tell my dad. This happened when I was staying with my grandma for the weekend. My uncle still lived with her, and occasionally I would stay over to work with my uncle for some good pay. Anyway, I was exhausted after a long day's work with my uncle, so I basically fell into the rickety old guest bed upstairs. I watched some TV for about 10 minutes before just deciding to go to sleep. It was a hot night. You know how on hot nights you constantly have to flip over the pillow to the cooler side? Well, when I did that, I put my head back down on the pillow. I didn't feel the soft, cushiony pillow on my cheek. I felt a furry, indescribable object press up on my face. I jumped up in response to it and saw a giant, full-grown huntsman spider sitting on my pillow. I fell to the opposite side of the bed, and I guess the shaking scared the thing because it took off at the speed of light. Where it went, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure the thing is still in my grandma's house.
This clip was taken by a Bangkok Airways pilot. The footage appears to show passengers towing their luggage through a connecting bridge towards the terminal of Phuket International Airport in southern Thailand. However, the bridge doesn't appear to be connected to a plane, leaving everyone to wonder where all the passengers were coming from. Some concluded that it may have just been the reflection from another bridge, while others still believe that they may have been the ghostly figures of dead passengers. This footage was captured by a Redditor who works as a night shift security guard at a hospital. On his first patrol through this hallway, he says the wheelchair was on the other side, and on his second patrol, he found it moved to the other side. So he started recording, and this is what he caught on video.
See, I fucking no.
He said this was really the only time he'd ever experienced anything paranormal like this. This next footage was captured by a homeowner's Nest camera, which is a camera designed to help homeowners monitor any suspicious activity around their homes. In this case, the owner continuously received messages from Nest saying it thinks it heard someone in the garage, or that it detected motion. Multiple strange occurrences happened through the span of a few hours, starting with a strange floating object near the center of the room. Throughout the footage, many orbs can be seen flying across the room, and in a few instances, the pinball machine in the back turns on by itself, and the pool balls even seem to move on their own. This is the video captured by an Argentine security guard named Raul Arguello. Raul had ventured below the bleachers of the stadium he works at to investigate a dressing room door which had been repeatedly opening and closing seemingly on its own. He was filming on his mobile phone in hopes of catching the possible culprits on camera. However, when he opens the door, no one is there. Unbeknownst to him, however, he captures the brief moment a specter quickly passes along the benches, crossing the video frame from left to right and disappearing through the wall.
Bueno, ya son como las 11 de la noche y la tercera vez que estoy escuchando este ruido de mierda. No sé qué está pasando, pero lo quiero grabar ahora para que después me crea la gente, porque esto nunca me pasó y nada, lo quería grabar. No sé yo, estoy podrido, la concha de la lora. Digo, en linterna, no sé para qué quiero darle. Dios. Puta que te parió. La puta que te parió. Concha de la lora. La concha de la lora. Pero ¿cómo mierda puede ser que no haya nada hoy? Ya es la tercera vez. Tercera vez que entro y no hay nada. Dios, me quiero ir. Quiero ir.
He stated he didn't see the ghostly figure himself, and only noticed it hours later when he checked the video footage on his phone. A home renovator was hired to remodel and sell a home, and turned on his camera after suspecting there's a squatter in the house after hearing mysterious sounds coming from around the house. What he eventually finds is something he says he couldn't explain.
Doing this cabinet crown, and I think there's a squatter in this house. I think it's in here. Hello? Hello? Anybody here? Hello? 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 Who is it?
Apparently, the man didn't finish work on the house under the belief that there was a ghostly or demonic presence inside. In this video, we watch as airport security guard Francisco Hernandez, who was finishing up his shift, heard a mysterious noise coming from a seemingly empty plane at a Mexico City airport. So he went to investigate, having no idea what he was about to see. He had to search the plane as part of the airline's protocol after hearing noises, and it's more than clear the plane was supposed to be empty.
Verga. No mames.
As the man shines his light down the aisle, a dark figure peers around the corner at him twice. The second time it happens, he notices it, sending him running in fear.
No mames.
Hello. Please leave a message after the tone.
This first one comes from Jade from Seattle. After college, Jade and her boyfriend Steve wanted to live together. They had talked about this since they were freshmen in college together often, and eventually they started their lives together. But unfortunately, all has not been happily ever after so far. For some time, almost every day after work, Jade will come home to unwanted gifts from a stranger. Gift baskets full of things like jewelry and other expensive items, and on other occasions flowers with letters. But every single time there would be a gift basket left, it would include a photo of Jade out in public with family, friends, her dog, or her boyfriend. One day, Jade took the basket into the house and began crying, causing Steve to come running to her side. Steve was furious, as he knew this wasn't just a sign of harassment, but also stalking. Steve would later install security cameras around the house. After a nice dinner one night, Jade was taking a bath and was listening to some relaxing music when she heard her phone ding. It was a text from an unknown number saying, "I'm outside." Jade screamed, causing Steve to rush in and see the text. So Steve checked the cameras through his phone and saw a tall man was at their doorstep. The man stood there for about 5 minutes before leaving in the direction of the woods. This was a screenshot of the man standing at the door with a black mask over his face. Jade also attached this video she recorded of herself home alone one night while Peter was at work, and the man came to the house knocking on the windows as she texts her mother and grandma in fear. After calling the police, they didn't provide much assistance to Jade, only suggesting she change her phone number. Fast forward a few nights, and Jade began to hear her phone go off at around 3 a.m. It was the same unknown number calling her. She didn't pick up the call, and about a minute or two later, Jade's phone vibrated, notifying her of a voicemail left from the number. This was the voicemail.
I don't have a house. I don't have any friends. No love. I have nothing to lie on. I have no eyes. No fear in me. I have no meaning. But I have this urge to kill. This is my world, and I'm the one who controls this. It's not a bloody game. I'll take you at any time, and you can do anything. I know you best, where you are, how fast you can run, and what scares you. I'm real. I'm not a legend or story. I took the souls.
The next morning, Jade and Steve went to the police station together to show them all the proof of what was happening. This was fairly recently that Jade sent me this, and the case is apparently still under investigation. She says the man still occasionally leaves unwanted gifts to this day. On November 21st, 2018, at around 1 in the morning, a young man named Dylan received a very strange and alarming voicemail. At the time he received the voicemail, he was asleep and didn't notice it until a few weeks later. This was the voicemail.
Hey Dylan, I just wanted to know, why is your bed that color? It's really nice looking out in the closet. It's a really nice blue and white bed. So tell me, what is your favorite scary movie? Or are you the scary movie?
Dylan said he had no idea who the girl was. He didn't recognize the voice. Yet whoever it was had his number, knew his name, and knew the color of his bed, blue and white. The girl on the other end claims to have been in his closet, and whether that was true or not, the intent of the call was obviously to scare Dylan, and admittedly, it would be a very unsettling voicemail for anyone to listen to. At the end, she asks what his favorite scary movie is, which could have been a reference to the movie Scream.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
Dylan reported the call to the police, who apparently weren't able to help since Dylan had taken so long to report it. When he would try to call the number back, it would dial to a weird random number, which led to an invalid number error.
Completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
A lot of women's worst fear are stalkers, people like the guy you just heard about in Jade's story. It's a much bigger and more common problem than most people realize. The voicemail you're about to hear was sent on December 14th of 2022 to a girl named Sasha. Sasha lives with 3 friends from her sorority in a house that they rent in Syracuse, New York. Sasha met a seemingly nice and normal guy while out in town with her friends. They spoke very briefly and she gave him her number. The man's name was Jeremy, and he doesn't go to school at Syracuse University like Sasha does. Rather, he was a local in the area. The two arranged to go on a date for drinks and dinner at a nearby bar. According to Sasha, the date didn't go well in her opinion, as he radiated unusual vibes, and she thought he was weird. She split the bill with him because she knew there wouldn't be a second date and she wanted to do the right thing. He dropped her back home after the date, and sent 3 texts later that night about how much fun he had and how much he liked her. It added to the discomfort for Sasha. Instead of responding, she hearted one of the messages, but the text continued on and on every single day, until the point that she decided to block him. Unfortunately, this was not the end. on the night of December 14th at 2:15 a.m. when everyone in the house was asleep, Sasha got an anonymous call that left this voicemail.
Sasha, it's Jeremy. I don't know why you can't answer any of my calls or texts. I think it's pretty fucked up. You shouldn't leave your windows open, by the way. I'm whispering because I don't want to wake you, but I left you a surprise on the kitchen table.
At the end of the call, you can hear a door shutting. This was the front door of Sasha's rental house, and the sound of the door closing alerted one of her housemates, who woke up everyone in the house to ask who just shut the front door. All 4 girls were in the house though, and it was none of them. This was when Sasha noticed the voicemail and listened to it with her housemates. What Jeremy left on the kitchen table was a stuffed animal turtle, Sasha's favorite animal, which she mentioned on her date with Jeremy. Alongside it was a Christmas card that simply said "Merry Christmas" from Jeremy. This prompted the girls to call the police, and Sasha showed the police officer the text and the voicemail. The voicemail was self-incriminating enough, and the non-stop text from Jeremy backed up the story. It was enough for the police to find Jeremy and charge him for breaking and entering and stalking. He only did a week in jail and was sentenced to community service and multiple fines. It's been a month and a half now, and Sasha has not heard from Jeremy. In the year 2015, an elderly woman from Greeley, Colorado with failing vision received this voicemail you're about to hear on her landline phone. In a panic from hearing the voicemail, the woman called her son from the neighbor's phone in a state of hysteria, stating someone had taken over her home phone. Her neighbor checked out the phone for her, and after telling her it was okay, she calmed down, but a few days later it happened again. The woman was truly petrified this time and once again went to her neighbor for consolation, but this time refused to go back to her house. Her neighbor called the woman's son to tell him about the situation, so the son took time off of work and traveled to Colorado the next day to help her. After testing the phone to see if anything was wrong, it seemed completely fine, but he planned to stay with her the following week to make sure she was okay. The son was horrified when he discovered what was really going on. When she had lifted the receiver, rather than the dial tone, she heard this message.
Connecting you. Please hold the line.
NORAD, EWS, Station Zulu Foxtrot 77, Zulu Foxtrot 77, Status Alert Con 4, Status Alert Con 4, Security Tracing in Progress.
The message would come around the same time every day for the next few days, between 7 p.m. and 7:15 p.m. Any other time of day, there was a normal dial tone, and the phone worked normally. The weirdest part was that the phone wouldn't ring at these times. The recording was heard instead of the dial tone if they lifted the receiver to make a call between 7 and 7:15 p.m. The son recorded the message, and the next day, the phone was dead for most of the day, unusable. Upon calling the phone company, they said they couldn't do anything as nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary from their end. That evening, the son tried to take another recording to see whether the message had changed, but it was just the dial tone now. The message was never heard through the phone again. The mother was still afraid to pick up the phone for a long time after this, causing the son to post the recordings online to see if anyone on the internet would have a clue to the meaning behind the recording. And while some people suggest that it may be some kind of secret government message or code, no one seems to know for sure. On October 29th of 2009 at 10:45 a.m., Braxton McCannon's mother kept receiving calls from his sister's phone. This was strange because Braxton's sister was home at the time, so as Braxton's mother left her room to go ask her daughter why she was calling her, she met her in the hallway. Braxton's sister was already on her way to her mom's room to tell her about the phone mysteriously calling her mother over and over again, and how it was scaring her. It was not her who was making the phone calls. It was her phone itself. The phone was currently still inside her room as they were talking, and during that time, Braxton's sister's phone called their mother again. This was proof to their mother that it was in fact not her daughter making the phone calls, as she was standing right there. This chilling realization wasn't the creepiest part though. This time there was a voicemail left after the call.
Message skipped. Save message.
In the voicemail, you can hear Braxton's sister's radio playing in her room. Then, unexpectedly, the radio cuts off and a completely random, disturbing sound starts blasting into the phone. The sound almost resembles a horrific screaming. Braxton noted that what's extra weird is that if this were a ghost dial, meaning any form of accidental call, the phone would have left a substantially longer message. But instead, it just hangs up after a few seconds on its own. Kevin Wynn, who was 25 at the time, went missing in the early hours of December 9th, 2018. His family said he was kicked out of a bar called the Brass Rail on Broadway after an altercation, and that's the last they've seen or heard from him. Family, friends, and strangers have been hoping to find him or hear from him ever since. The following Sunday, nearly 150 volunteers and family members gathered at Lakeside Park to continue the search. The family searched the banks of the St. Joseph and St. Mary's rivers, and also the area around the Brass Rail. The following Thursday, they found his glasses broken in the parking lot of the bar. Kevin's family stated that his vision was very bad, and the fact that his glasses were broken and left behind was a very bad sign, and there's no way he'd be able to make his way around without seeing. Management at the bar told the family that Kevin had entered the bar 4 times the night he went missing. There's an Arby's down the road from the bar that had given the family 2 videos. They show Kevin walking by the restaurant alone, one around 1:40 in the morning, the other around 2:45 in the morning. The Brass Rail has given their surveillance video to detectives, but after 2 long years with no word, the family has become less hopeful. Many people believe he had broken his glasses and without his vision simply stumbled into the river and drowned. But if this were the case, the body would have been found during the multiple searches of the river, or at the very least, the body would have been washed up somewhere by now. In 2002, Michaela Lawrence, who was 12 at the time, and her entire family received news that her father had been in a fatal car accident. His body was barely recognizable from the wreck. The family, of course, opted for a closed casket funeral. A few weeks after the funeral, things started appearing in the mailbox of the Lawrence household. Small packages with Michaela's name written on them. The packages would come once every few weeks. The first package was a small knick-knack type item. It was a decorative model glow-up Big Ben clock statue. It was a familiar piece that Michaela's mother recognized from the house somewhere. A few weeks later, another package came. This package contained an old antique stopwatch from the 50s. It didn't work anymore, but once again it looked familiar to Michaela's mother. None of the packages said who they were from or where they came from. A few more weeks later, on Michaela's 13th birthday, a card in an envelope ended up in the mailbox, and written on it was Michaela's name again. The card was a happy birthday card, but once again the mother recognized this card and the handwriting was familiar. It was the handwriting of her thought-to-be deceased husband, but it was a card that the couple had given to their daughter years ago, and it was signed Love Mom and Dad. This confirmed her suspicions that the items that had been arriving in the mail were possessions from the house, those of her husband's. She tried to check the safe in the bedroom closet to see if anything was missing, but mysteriously the safe combination no longer seemed to work no matter how many times she tried. She tried going to the police about the packages at her house, but police couldn't do anything except advise to install some kind of security system. To this day, it's not known who sent the packages or how whoever sent them got a hold of them. Frauke Liebs disappeared on June 20th, 2006 from the town Paderborn in Germany. Her body was found almost 4 months later, on October 4th, 2006. The circumstances of her disappearance are mysterious, especially since she's believed to have made contact with her friends between her disappearance and her death. 2006 was the year of the Football World Cup in Germany. Frauke met with some friends at the Old Triangle Irish pub in downtown Paderborn to watch some of the games. Her mom dropped her off at the pub around 9 p.m. During the Sweden-England match, she exchanged text messages with an acquaintance until the battery of her cell phone ran out. She then borrowed the battery of her friend, but the friend said that she returned the battery before leaving. At about 11 p.m., Frauke left the bar. It's assumed that she walked home because she was said to only have about €5 on her at that point. Her flat was about 1 mile away from the pub. Nobody knows which path she took because nobody saw her after she left the pub. Her flatmate Chris claimed that she never arrived in the flat. At 12:49 a.m., her roommate received a text from Frauke, which stated that she'd be back late. She did not appear at work the following day, and after she was not in the apartment, Frauke's mother reported her missing. Over the next few days, Frauke contacted her roommate 5 times over cell phone. The calls were usually short and during the evening hours and did not contain a lot of information about her situation. In the first calls, she hinted that she would come back soon, but answered further questions evasively or mysteriously. The last phone call was received on the evening of June 27th, while Frauke's sister was present. Frauke got asked by her sister if she was held against her will, and she supposedly said yes, but then immediately corrected herself by saying no in a louder tone. After that, the contact of Frauke was lost. According to police, during these phone calls, Frauke's cell phone was in various industrial zones of Paderborn. The police also assumed that the calls were placed from within a car that was driven to those areas. The case was never solved. Jack Wheeler held many important positions throughout his lifetime. He was a chairman for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, a senior planner for Amtrak, an official of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and more. His value to his community made it much worse when Jack disappeared on December 28, 2010, after exiting an Amtrak near Wilmington, Delaware. He was later seen on December 30th at 10th and Orange Street in Wilmington. On December 31st, his body was discovered by a landfill worker as it fell onto a trash heap in the Cherry Island landfill. His death was later ruled a homicide. His death was ruled to be due to assault and blunt force trauma. It was determined that all of the stops the garbage truck had made that day involved large commercial disposal bins in Newark, a few miles from Jack's home. Prior to Jack's death, he was cited several times. On December 29th, he was sighted at the Newcastle County Courthouse parking garage. He was disoriented and wearing only one shoe. He tried to gain access to the garage on foot, claiming that he wanted to warm up before paying the parking fee. He told the attendant that his briefcase had been stolen, and he kept claiming that he wasn't intoxicated, but the attendant didn't believe him. It was later determined that his car was in a different garage. This was the last CCTV footage taken of him. Later that day, Jack asked a pharmacist in Newcastle for a ride to Wilmington. He reportedly looked upset at the time. The pharmacist offered to call him a cab. He then left the store. On December 30th, he was seen wandering around various office buildings. Several people asked if he needed help, but he refused any assistance. This case has still never been solved. Lastly, we have the disappearance of Brian Schaefer. In 2006, Ohio State student Brian Schaefer went into a bar and never came out. He was out with 2 friends one night and they went to a bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. This bar had a front main entrance and a back entrance for staff and entertainment, both of which had cameras pointed at them. Around 10 p.m. that night, Brian called his girlfriend to tell her that he loved her. Soon after, Brian is seen on camera entering the bar, and then later seen stepping out of the bar to talk to 2 girls before going back inside. Minutes before the bar closed and they were preparing to leave, Brian told his friends he was going to talk to the band. Brian walked away out of sight and his friends waited for him, but he was never seen again. This was not a large bar, and the band does not remember talking to him. On top of it, the cameras never caught him exiting the bar. No one knows what happened to Brian after he walked away from his friends, or how he left the bar, or if he ever did for that matter. An FBI agent who was specialized in facial recognition spent a long time analyzing the security footage of the bar and watched every person who came in and out of the venue. He never identified Brian leaving, but years later, after he had stopped working on the case, he was at an Ohio State football game and saw someone across the crowd that he couldn't help but think looked very much like Brian. In fact, he bore such a resemblance to Brian that the agent had to go and talk to him. It turned out it was Brian's brother, proving just how good the agent's facial recognition abilities were. Brian's girlfriend called his cell phone every day for weeks, and it always went straight to voicemail until one night when it actually rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. This was unexplainable. The truly weirdest part about this whole thing is that the last footage of Brian was him re-entering the bar. No footage was ever found of him leaving the bar, which has led to theories that he never did leave. To this day, no one knows where he is. On the 22nd of November, 2019, at around 8 p.m., a doorbell camera at a home in Harriet Creek Ranch, Texas, captured footage of a young girl approaching the front door. She was holding a flashlight and looked extremely distressed. She also kept checking behind her, likely to see if someone was following her or not.
Help, please.
Unfortunately for her, the house she approached was empty. The residents were away on vacation, so no one was there to answer. This made her even more panicked as she continued to beg for help.
Please help.
By the time the homeowners noticed the footage, it was already too late. The little girl was long gone, and there were no signs of her anywhere in the neighborhood. But the big question remained: who the girl was, and why she had come to their door in such a frightened state that night. The homeowners didn't recognize her, and she didn't look like any of the neighbors' kids either, so they contacted the police and also uploaded the footage online, hoping the video might reach someone with more information on her. Sadly, it's been 6 years since this footage was captured, and no one has been able to identify the young girl. That said, people online have come up with a few theories that might contain some truth. The more cynical side of the internet believes the girl was nothing more than bait for a group of robbers hiding just outside the camera's view. It's a known tactic where robbers send a scared-looking child or woman to the front door. Out of concern, the homeowner opens the door to help, only for the robbers to appear from hiding and force their way inside. However, this theory doesn't really hold up when you consider just how genuinely distressed the girl sounded. Her voice and the frantic way she knocked seemed too real for a child that age to be faking. The more likely and more tragic theory is that this girl was 9-year-old Serenity Dennard, who had gone missing earlier that year. Serenity had been diagnosed with reactive detachment disorder and disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, which caused emotional instability and frequent attempts to run away. She was admitted to Black Hills Children's Home, a youth treatment facility near Rockerville, South Dakota. Unfortunately, the staff weren't able to keep a proper eye on her, resulting in her running away from the facility on the 3rd of February 2019. A massive search effort involving over 1,200 people was launched, but despite their best efforts, they couldn't find any clues about her whereabouts. The working theory was that she likely ran into the wooded area surrounding the facility, got lost, and succumbed to hypothermia. However, police didn't rule out foul play. This is where the mysterious doorbell footage comes in. Many speculated that the girl in the video was Serenity, who had gone missing 9 months earlier. It's possible that a kidnapper took her to another state, and after months in captivity, she escaped and tried to ask for help. Though Serenity's family viewed the footage and said the girl wasn't her, many people online still believe it was. Unfortunately, none of the theories were ever confirmed or disproven. Investigators weren't able to find Serenity, and search efforts were officially suspended in early 2021, and the girl in the haunting doorbell video was never identified either, leaving her case an unsolved mystery. On the morning of July 31st, 2022, just before 11 a.m., 22-year-old Allison Duckrow and her mother returned to their home in Sydney, Ohio after breakfast. While making their way inside, an unknown car pulled into their driveway. A second later, the driver approached the front door, 22-year-old James Rail, Allison's ex-boyfriend. The two had broken up over 18 months earlier and hadn't spoken since. The night before, he had sent her a creepy voice note saying he would visit her the next day.
Hi, Allie.
It's James. I just wanted to reach out to you because I just wanted to see how you're doing and maybe hear from you if that would be alright, I guess. It's been a while since I've talked to you, and I don't know. I feel like it, I don't know what I feel. I do know that I do want to talk to you, though. I do. It'd be nice. Be sweet. It's probably late right now, but if you want tomorrow, you could probably give me a call. And yeah, it's about it. Please give me a call back. Thank you.
Allison never responded or gave permission, but he showed up anyway. She recognized him through the live camera feed and decided to ignore him. After about 3 minutes, James left the porch, only to circle the house looking for another way in. When that failed, he returned to the front door again and began trying to break his way in. When Allison and her family didn't open the door, he became agitated and started forcing it, with James refusing to stop. Allison's father was left with no choice but to use his firearm, ending the confrontation minutes later. The family had already called the police, but no one could have anticipated the scene that awaited them. Allison and her dad were questioned, and her father later stood trial on August 4th, 2022.
So if you would, I understand, were you aware of the text messages that James had sent your daughter last night?
Was not.
Okay, so your daughter did not share those with you?
No.
Okay.
Thanks to the doorbell camera footage, he was acquitted of all charges on the basis of self-defense. On the night of January 18th, 2025, a homeowner in Carrollton, North Texas received a doorbell notification while out shopping. When she checked the live feed, she saw a mysterious man standing on her porch dressed in all black with a red face and holding what looked like a cardboard box. He moved closer, revealing that he was wearing a red satanic goat mask. He rang the doorbell and then walked away, leaving behind a sign with the words Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 15. The verse references the binding of Satan, resurrection, judgment, and eternal torment, making the visit even more disturbing. The homeowner called the police, but since the man hadn't committed a crime, they couldn't do much. As she later said in an interview, I'm scared to leave the house. I'm scared to be at the house." The story was later dropped by the media, and no follow-up information was ever reported. On July 21st, 2023, two elderly women visited the home of their friend, 58-year-old Sharon Gordon, in Dudley, UK. They hadn't heard from her in days, and upon entering, they discovered her lying face down near the stairs, covered in blood. Police arrived quickly and confirmed it was a homicide. Investigators then checked the doorbell footage, which showed the last visitor to Sharon's home, her contractor, Peter Norgrove. He initially claimed Sharon was alive when he left, but footage revealed him leaving with bloodstains on his trousers. Investigators also found the weapon he used in his shed, and he later confessed. Sharon had hired him to build an extension, but after 15 months of delays and poor work, she confronted him. Peter lost his temper and attacked her with a hammer. He later pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. On October 6, 2024, Kristen Paul was watching TV at her home in Fresno, California, waiting for her husband to return. Just after midnight, the doorbell rang. Assuming it was her husband, she opened the door, only to find an unknown woman with a crazed look. Christine slammed the door shut, but the woman became enraged and began trying to force it open. When that failed, she tried breaking in through a nearby window. Christine called the police while arming herself for protection. Luckily, an officer arrived within minutes and de-escalated the situation.
Hi! Hi!
You live here?
No, I don't.
So why are you banging on the door?
Because my friend is there.
Despite her erratic behavior, the woman immediately calmed down when confronted by police and was taken into custody. Christine later said she was just thankful the officer wasn't a minute later. On August 12, 2025, the Wilson family was asleep in their home in Midlothian, Texas. At around 1 a.m., 21-year-old Malia noticed a bright flash outside. When she ran downstairs, she saw their front yard engulfed in flames, just inches from the house.
Came halfway down the stairs and I seen this window right here just lit up in flames, and I just ran and got my dad.
She woke her father, who called the fire department. Firefighters arrived within minutes and extinguished the flames before they reached the home. The doorbell camera revealed that someone had poured gasoline around the house and set it on fire before fleeing. The suspect wore a hoodie and mask, concealing their identity. The homeowner, Darrell Wilson, believed the attack was retaliation for a lawsuit he had filed against a former employer. However, police had not caught the arsonist, leaving the family terrified the attacker might return. In the early morning of March 11, 2025, a homeowner in North York, Pennsylvania, was awoken by strange movement on their porch. The footage showed a person wearing a colorful tie-dye cloak and a paper plate mask decorated with jagged teeth and red eyes. They carried a cardboard box, which they placed on the doormat before announcing themselves as the Box Demon.
I am the Box Demon.
A faint lullaby played in the background as they walked away into the darkness. Thankfully, the box was empty. People online later suggested the figure was dressed as Dandy, a Roblox horror character, though the meaning behind the act remains a mystery. In June 2023, the mother of Instagram model Guste Genescate noticed something disturbing in their doorbell footage. An unknown man had been following Guste home and was seen lingering around the house. He looked through the windows and wandered around the property. Terrified, her mother called the police, but they couldn't take action since no crime had been committed. Unable to sleep, Guste set up a rope booby trap in the yard. A week later, the man returned and tripped on it around 2 a.m. When Guste checked the camera, she saw him standing right outside her bedroom window, staring inside. She woke her mother, who banged on the window and scared him away. Another woman in the neighborhood later reported the same man. Despite having a clear image of his face, police were unable to identify him, forcing Guste and her mother to move. As of now, the stalker remains unidentified. Late one night in an Alexandria, Virginia neighborhood, a doorbell camera captured pure horror. Three masked figures in full Halloween costumes stood outside a home at around 10 p.m. and refused to leave. One of the occupants, Shayla, initially thought it was a prank and even greeted them with Happy Halloween. But within seconds, the mood changed. The trio rang the bell, shook the doorknob, and kept knocking, the knocks growing louder and more aggressive.
Open the door! Open the door!
When they couldn't force open the front door, they moved to the backyard, slashed through a wooden fence, smashed a deck screen, and pounded on the windows, taunting the family inside. They threatened to kill the occupants, telling them it's either you coming out or we coming in.
Either you come out or we coming in.
The ordeal lasted about 6 to 10 minutes before the masked intruders finally left, but not before leaving the family shaken and fearful. The homeowner's daughter later said they were forced into hiding and felt unsafe in their own home.
She just died, so it's just like, I'm just glad I was there. Now she's in fear. She don't want to stay there by herself. It could have been bad. Our Second Amendment right was not used and could have been, like, being very transparent.
Authorities launched a criminal investigation for attempted burglary and criminal threats. On the 18th of November 1978, members of the Guyanese police force and the US military ventured into the dense rainforest of northern Guyana. Their target was a man named Jim Jones, the leader of an American cult that had settled into the region 4 years earlier. He and his followers had carved out a massive section in the middle of this forest and turned it into a complete compound called Jonestown. The only way to reach this town was to trek through dense vegetation, 100-foot tall trees, and muddy ground. That said, the true danger of the mission was beyond the trek. Jim was likely already aware of the mission to apprehend him, so there would be a good chance that this group of police officers and military personnel would be welcomed by a small militia that was armed to the gills. However, when the group reached Jonestown, it was eerily quiet, and as they stepped through its entrance, they came across a scene that could only be described as hell on earth. The entire town was empty, except for the central pavilion, which was surrounded by the remains of hundreds of people, including many children. The total number of victims was calculated to be around 900, making it the largest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate incident up until that point in history. And while this was initially considered an open and shut case of a mass suicide, the reality was far more horrific than anyone could have imagined. Jim Jones' cult originally started as a church in the US, but as it became more popular, it started garnering criticism from the media and the government for Jim's support of communism in places like Soviet Russia. So in 1974, he moved deep into the rainforests of Guyana to escape the scrutiny, and a large number of his most loyal followers went with him. He presented this new location as a self-sustained paradise where he and his followers could live a life of peace and serenity.
These are potato chips made from plantain, and they're more delicious. They're a combination of a potato chip and a french fry. And radishes, You don't know what you're missing down here? They make their own buns and hamburgers and the leafy green vegetables. By the way, we just won first prize from the national government of Guyana for our leafy green vegetables. Here are the people at the table eating an afternoon snack. You see Pepsi-Cola's here, 3 cents, American money. That sounds appetizing, doesn't it? I can't get anybody to go home with me.
When in reality, life in Jonestown was anything but peaceful. Members were required to work 12 hours every day for 6 days a week, and there was nothing they could do to escape these torturous conditions. Jim had already reached an agreement with the Guyanese government to make getting a visa back to the US almost impossible. On top of that, the whole compound was surrounded by a fence, with armed guards patrolling outside to catch anyone trying to escape. But as time went on, relatives of the cult members still living in the US began urging the government to bring their loved ones back home. So in November of 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan and 17 other people, including members of the media, visited Guyana to investigate Jonestown. They reached the headquarters on November 17th and began their operation, looking around, talking to people, anything they could do to learn the truth about Jonestown. Surprisingly, things looked just as carefree and jovial as Jim had portrayed in his promotional videos. Of course, it later came out that Jim had actually run rehearsals on how to convince Leo's delegation that everyone was happy and in good spirits. But even then, the truth didn't stay hidden for long. That night, 2 members, Vernon and Monica, secretly passed an ominous note to the delegation that read, "Dear Congressmen, Vernon Gosney and Monica Bagby, please help us get out of Jonestown." This prompted the delegation members to ask others if they wanted to leave as well, and 9 more cult members found the courage to come forward. This even included one of Jim's closest men, shedding light on just how bad the living conditions in Jonestown truly were. The next morning, Leo's group took these members to the nearby Kaituma airstrip so they could return home. But just as they were boarding the planes, Jim's henchmen pulled up in front of the plane in a truck and opened fire, killing 4 people, including Congressman Leo Ryan. Back at Jonestown, Jim gathered the members at the central pavilion and told them to drink the poisoned grape flavor aid. In his words, this was the only way to escape the American government.
We can't go back. They won't leave us alone. They're now going back to tell more lies, which means more congressmen. And there's no way we can survive.
In the end, while many brainwashed cult members agreed with Jim and drank the poison juice willingly, others, including children, were forced to drink it at gunpoint. Some were even injected with cyanide or shot outright. The American military was on its way to Jonestown as soon as it became aware of the shooting at the airstrip. Unfortunately, by the time they got there, it was already too late. The sheer scale of the tragedy, combined with the fact that many of the victims were forced into it, turned it into the most haunting sight those soldiers or anyone has ever found in a forest. On April 4th, 1922, a mechanic named Albert Hofner visited the Gruber house located near a forest in Weidhofen, Germany. The family had hired him to repair their barn motor a few weeks earlier. However, when he reached the house, he noticed something strange. The cows and dogs were making a lot of noise in the barn, yet the rest of the house was completely silent. He tried knocking and calling out to them many times, but no one came to the door either. Assuming they weren't home, he waited in their yard for an hour before deciding to leave. But just as he was about to leave, he noticed that the door to the motorroom was unlocked. So he decided to repair the motor anyway and come back for his payment later. After finishing the repairs, Albert wanted to inform one of their neighbors about his work, but the home was completely isolated, with the closest neighbor over half a kilometer away. With no other option, he made the detour and knocked on the door of Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Gruber's closest neighbor. Lorenz, however, found the empty house extremely suspicious. He knew the family well and figured they would have informed him if they were going somewhere. So later that evening, he joined two of his neighbors to go check things out for themselves. Sure enough, the house was just as empty as Albert had reported. As they were looking around the house, one of them noticed that the door to the machine area was also unlocked. The three entered through this door. After examining the machine room, they decided to check further by breaking open the barn door connected to it. However, the horrific sight they witnessed on the other side of the door likely stayed with them for the rest of their lives. At first, things looked normal, but then one of them spotted what looked like a human foot sticking out from a pile of hay. This turned out to be the remains of 72-year-old Kazilia, the head lady of the house. As they got closer, they also noticed 3 more bodies scattered throughout the barn. These included the head of the house, 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, and his 2 daughters. Things became even more gruesome. They also discovered the remains of Andreas's 2-year-old grandson Josef in his stroller, with his skull crushed in, as well as the family maid Maria in a different room. Someone had murdered the entire Gruber family and left without getting caught. Later investigation concluded that the family was killed 4 days earlier on the 1st of April, but what made this already horrific crime even more chilling was that it was carried out over the course of several hours. The killer likely spent a long time in the house afterward, trying to hide the evidence by covering it with hay and blankets. The room with the maid even had clothes stuffed into its windowsill to make spotting her from outside more difficult. Most assumed this was the result of a robbery gone wrong. However, most valuables were still in the house, which complicated the case even further. Neighbors reported that the family had seen men staring at their home from the woods on multiple occasions. Their previous maid had quit months earlier, claiming the house was haunted, and someone had broken into the machine room a few days before the killings. None of these clues helped investigators find the killer, and since the home was so isolated, there were no witnesses. To this day, the Gruber family murders remain an unsolved mystery. In July 2015, Mark Andre was marking trees in the dense Arcata Community Forest in California. He worked as Arcata's environmental services director and was doing a routine inspection when something strange caught his attention. Just off the hiking trail, Mark noticed an unusual structure poking through the vegetation. He got closer and was shocked to find a cabin in the middle of the forest. What made this discovery even more strange was the fact that this wasn't a hastily built shack. It was surprisingly well constructed, with a stable cinder block base, plastic sheets to keep things dry, and even a lock on the front door. Someone had clearly spent weeks, if not months, building it from scratch. Mark immediately notified the park rangers, who spent the next few days staking out near the cabin to see if the owner would return. They eventually broke the lock to see if they could find any clues about who lived there, but this only left them even more confused. Inside, they found everything someone would need to survive in the middle of nowhere: fresh water, a wood-burning stove, canned food, and even books stacked neatly on the shelves. It looked more like a cramped studio apartment than a makeshift cabin, yet none of the items inside provided any clues about the owner's identity. Since no one had returned after several days, rangers assumed the cabin had been abandoned. They followed proper procedures and left an eviction notice on the front door before leaving the site. But when Mark and the rangers returned to demolish it, they made an even more shocking discovery. The entire cabin had vanished without a trace. There wasn't even a single nail left behind. In its place was the international symbol of squatter drawn in charcoal. This raised more questions than it answered. How did the cabin's residents always manage to be away whenever the rangers visited? And more importantly, why were they hiding in the middle of a forest in the first place? It's possible this person was a criminal on the run, but even after a decade, no one knows the real answer. In May 2016, a hiker was walking through a forest in Harlan, Kentucky. About halfway through his trip, he discovered a trail camera lying on the forest floor. Trail cameras are typically used to capture wildlife footage, but this particular camera didn't have any storage or battery. Assuming it was abandoned, the hiker took it home and gave it to a friend to see if it could be fixed. What neither of them knew was that this camera was actually a trap set by a madman. As soon as the friend connected a battery to it, the camera exploded. The blast was powerful enough to blow off some of the man's fingers and injure his stomach. The device had been rigged to explode the moment it received power. After being alerted to the incident, authorities swept the area where the camera was found and discovered another trail camera with similar modifications, but it didn't contain anything that could help identify who placed it there. While canvassing local neighborhoods, investigators finally caught a break. 2 different people reported hearing an explosion at a neighbor's house several months earlier. That neighbor was 39-year-old Mark Sawaf. When authorities searched his home, they found buckets filled with bomb-making materials and a handwritten note that read, "Broken camera for a broken soul." He was arrested on June 21st, 2016, but before he could be officially charged, the police wanted his help locating other explosive cameras he may have left behind. During this trip, Sawaf tried to grab an officer's gun, likely in an attempt to escape. In the struggle, he was accidentally shot and killed. Before his death, he helped the police find 12 more rigged cameras hidden throughout the Harlan forest, but it's entirely possible that many others are still out there, waiting to be discovered by an unsuspecting passerby. On November 10th, 1985, a hunter was walking through the dense woods of Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown, New Hampshire. He'd used this route many times before, but this time, something unusual caught his eye. Hidden beneath a pile of leaves and debris was a rusted 55-gallon metal drum. Curious, he walked closer, only to discover the chopped-up remains of 2 people inside. Authorities were alerted immediately. Later investigation revealed the victims were a young woman and a young girl. Both had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head, then cut into pieces and stuffed into the barrel. Sadly, both bodies were too disfigured to identify. With no leads, the case went cold until the year 2000. A state trooper was revisiting the area where the first barrel was found, hoping to uncover new clues. But instead, he came across something far worse. Another identical 55-gallon barrel, just 150 yards from the first one. Inside were the remains of 2 more young girls, both between 1 and 4 years old. They had been killed in the same brutal fashion, blunt force trauma, then dismembered. The discovery confirmed that all 4 murders were the work of the same person, but even with this new evidence, the case remained unsolved for another 14 years. Finally, thanks to advanced DNA testing, 3 of the 4 victims were identified. The adult woman was 24-year-old Marlice Elizabeth Honeychurch. The 2 children were her daughters, 7-year-old Mary Vaughn and 11-month-old Sarah McWaters. This identification helped narrow the investigation, but didn't immediately reveal the killer. Eventually, DNA tests pointed to a man named Terry Petter Rasmussen.
Ended up a doctor And both stories have their footings. Maybe she hurt herself, and you're concerned about that getting out, if she's harmed herself. No. If you're thinking, is she suicidal? Yes.
Unbeknownst to the authorities at the time, Rasmussen had already been arrested for the 2002 murder of his wife. He was sentenced to life in prison and died in 2010, long before anyone linked him to the Bear Brook murders. Although the case is technically solved, many questions remain unanswered, and with the killer no longer alive to face justice, the story remains one of the most disturbing and unresolved tragedies ever uncovered in a forest. A man walking his dog near Ashford, Washington, made one of the most disturbing discoveries in Red Elm Woods, an isolated forest known for its lack of maintained trails and almost no cell service. He had taken a rarely used fire road about 2 miles in when his dog began growling at a thick patch of underbrush just off the path. There was a strong, rotten smell in the air, bad enough that he initially assumed it was a dead animal. When he went to investigate, he found a shallow pit, roughly 5 feet across. Inside were 6 large bundles wrapped in black plastic sheeting and duct tape. Heavy river stones had been placed on top of each one as if to weigh them down. One of the bundles had a tear near a corner, and through it, he saw a human hand. He backed out immediately and contacted the local sheriff's office. A forensic team was sent in the next day. What they uncovered was grim. 6 wrapped packages, each containing partial human remains. In total, investigators identified parts from at least 4 different victims, all dismembered and sealed in layers of plastic and tape. The victims had been killed in different ways. One had severe head trauma, another had signs of strangulation, and one had been partially burned. The remains were in various stages of decomposition. According to the medical examiner, the bodies hadn't all been dumped at once. The site had been used over a span of several years, with new remains added slowly over time. One victim was linked to a missing persons report from 2003. Another had never been reported missing at all and still remains unidentified. The location was less than 30 feet from a trail, one that occasional hikers still used. Despite the remains being found in a methodical burial site, no suspects were ever arrested. No fingerprints, no DNA matches beyond the victims, and no witnesses. To this day, the identity of whoever created the pit is still unknown. In October of 1991, a man walking along a rural lane near Bolney, England, made a discovery that still haunts investigators. Hidden in the underground, wrapped tightly in a piece of carpet, was a human torso. The head and both hands were missing. The arms had been cut cleanly just below the elbows, likely to remove identifying tattoos. Forensic analysis determined the victim was a physically fit man between 30 and 45 years old, likely of southern German origin. There was no match to any missing persons report in the UK. The precision of the dismemberment suggested that the killer knew exactly what they were doing. Whoever they were, they had taken deliberate steps to erase this man's identity. Investigators launched Operation A23, a massive task force involving 60 officers and more than €150,000 in resources. They even searched a nearby abandoned rental house, which was once occupied by a man using a German alias. Inside was a strange clue, an adult magazine with numbers written inside, but no direct link to the murder was ever found. Over 3 decades later, the victim remains unidentified and the killer never caught. All that's left of the case is a name given by the media, the Bolney Torso.
A man and woman went to Las Vegas for their honeymoon and checked into a suite at a hotel. When they got to their room, they both detected a bad odor. The husband called down to the front desk and asked to speak to the manager. He explained that the room smelled very bad and they would like another suite. The manager apologized and told the man that they were all booked because of a convention. He offered to send them to a restaurant of their choice for lunch, compliments of the hotel, and said he was going to send a maid up to their room to clean and to try and get rid of the odor. After a nice lunch, the couple went back to their room. When they walked in, they could both still smell the horrible odor. Again, the husband called the front desk and told the manager that the room still smelled really bad. The manager told the man that they would try and find a suite at another hotel. He called every hotel on the strip, but every hotel was sold out because of the convention. The manager told the couple that they couldn't find them a room anywhere, but they would try and clean the room again. The couple wanted to see the sights and do a little gambling anyway, so they said they would give them 2 hours to clean and then they would be back. When the couple had left, the manager and all of the housekeeping staff went to the room to try and find what was making it smell so bad. They went through the entire suite and found nothing. So the maids put in new sheets, new towels, took down the curtains and put new ones up, cleaned the carpet, and cleaned the suite again using the strongest cleaning products they had. The couple came back 2 hours later to find the room still had a bad odor. The husband was so angry at this point, he decided to find whatever the smell was himself, so he started tearing the entire suite apart. As he pulled the top mattress off the box spring of the bed, he found a dead body of a woman. Me and my wife were on our honeymoon in Hawaii. We were on the island of Oahu, sitting on the beach. My wife got up to go to the bathroom, and when she got back, she told me that there was a creepy man watching her walk into the bathroom, and when she tried to walk out, he blocked her path. She only got away because there were 2 other people walking into the bathroom, so he got out of the way. I asked her what the man looked like, and she looked over, but unfortunately, she said he was gone. Our hotel was walking distance from the beach, so we got back quickly, but we made sure to report the man to a police officer we saw walking on the beach, and then we washed up before going out to eat. We ate at a fancy seafood place and did some walking around afterwards. Close to midnight, we finally went back to the room and began to wind down. Then we got a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole of the door and saw a man in a maid uniform standing outside. I opened the door and he immediately tried to let himself in. I pushed him back a bit, asking him what he wanted. He told me he left something in the room while cleaning earlier and needed to get it out. The only thing, we left the do not disturb sign on the door all day. Then I noticed he was making eye contact with my wife. My wife then screamed, "That's the man!" I didn't understand at first, but it was too late for that. The man had already lunged at me, holding my throat with one hand while reaching behind himself with another. He pulled out a knife and started swinging at me, and if it weren't for my wife coming over and smashing his face with the lamp, I would have been as good as dead. The commotion drew out all the inhabitants of the neighboring rooms. One of the women started freaking out and screaming, making the situation worse. We called the police, and so did the hotel. It turned into a huge, horrible scene, but we were just happy to be alive. We were questioned when the police arrived, and some of the other people around us claimed to have witnessed it all. We still don't know what kind of intentions this guy had, but if I had to guess, I would say he wanted to get to my wife. He must have been one very dumb person to think he would get away with something like this in such a public building. Me, my wife, and 2 kids were taking a drive all the way down to Florida from New York to go to Disney. We were in Georgia at the time, so close to entering Florida, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. I planned on finishing the drive that night just to save the money from a night at a hotel. My wife and kids were already long asleep, so I was trying to drive as smoothly as possible. On that quiet highway at 11 o'clock, there were hardly any other cars at all. In fact, I didn't see any lights until, up in the horizon, I saw 2 flashing red lights. Not police lights, more like SOS lights. I slowed down and proceeded with caution. Upon getting closer, I saw a car parked in the middle of the road, seemingly deliberately to block traffic, along with 2 cones placed on either side and 2 SOS lights flashing on the ground. Then, 2 hooded men of African American descent came from behind the car and started walking over to us. I put the car in reverse, ready to hightail it back the other way. One of the men came over to my window, and I cracked it open just enough to hear him speak. After asking him if he needed something, He said, "Yes, open the door." I shut the window, and that's when he began to reach for something in his pocket. I put the car back in drive and hit the gas. I drove over the cone and SOS light and past their car. About 1 minute later, I saw a pair of headlights coming up fast behind us. At this point, my wife was awake, confused and questioning me about the speed we were moving at. I told her not to make any loud noises before telling her that we were being followed. The car behind us began flashing its lights. And then there was a loud pop, and I felt the car losing control. I did the best I could to bring it under control, but there was a second loud pop, and the car began to drag. I told my wife to call 911, even though it was probably already too late. By now my kids were up, scared and complaining. I kept the car moving for as long as possible, but the car following us began ramming our trunk. My kids were crying, my wife was screaming at the police. I was sure we were dead. But by some stroke of luck, or more like a miracle, I heard a siren and saw red and blue flashing lights coming up in the distance behind our chasers. They veered off to the exit that we happened to be passing at that moment, and the police car followed them. I pulled over to the side of the road, took the phone away from my wife, and told the police everything. Upon inspection, I found out that our 2 back tires were blown, probably shot at, which I also told the police. 10 minutes later, a squad pulled up behind us, along with a AAA truck. They seemed rather thrilled to inform us that they caught the 2 men. Someone else had stumbled onto their little roadblock trap, but luckily managed to turn around and escape before calling the cops. When my sister was in her 20s, she was on vacation with her now husband, and one of their destinations was St. Martin. They had rented a car to get around and such. One day while doing sightseeing, they were on some side road that was rather isolated from any buildings or signs of civilization. It was a nice scenic route to take, but other than that, my sister tells me that it was a pretty dead road, so it probably didn't lead anywhere important. They eventually came up to something odd. There was the back of a car sticking out of the crops on the side of the road. As they pulled up closer, they could see it was some unbranded rusty neon blue car that had seemingly swerved into the crops. My sister's husband pulled up and stopped the car, telling my sister to wait in the car. He got out to check it out. From what my sister tells me, her husband looked through all the windows of the car for anybody at all. She watched as he then looked down and jumped back at something. She then got out of the car to see what was wrong. They both got down low to have a look underneath the rusty old car. What they saw was horrifying. There were 2 grown men with large knives in their hands, along with a bloody dead body laying between them. My sister's husband literally pushed her all the way back to the car and shoved her into her seat. The 2 men had crawled out from under the car and were now on their feet. He made it back into the car just in time to drive off down the road. They stopped at the nearest sign of civilization, making sure they weren't being followed, and called the police. Both of them seem to get uneasy when the topic is brought up, so we try not to remind them of it, but I can tell my sister has always been a bit different ever since this happened to her. I was 16 years old and the summer had just started. Our grandparents were treating the whole family to a 10-day cruise. It was a Royal Caribbean cruise, and we were going to Florida and the Bahamas. It was me, my 2 brothers, my sister and her boyfriend, my parents, my aunt and uncle, my 2 cousins, and my grandparents. I spent most of my time hanging out with my older brother, Rob, who was 20. We got to share a room together, even though it really wasn't allowed. We just claimed that our dad was staying with us in that room. So one night, me and my brother were in the nightclub of the ship. I snuck in using someone else's ship ID card. When I was in there, I noticed some older, creepy-looking man sitting by the wall, and I was sure he was staring intently at me. I made a point of moving around to see if he was really looking at me, and his head turned to face me wherever I went. I was feeling really uncomfortable, so I left right then and there. I coincidentally found my sister and her boyfriend sitting by the bar outside of the club. I sat down with them for a bit, and a few moments later, I saw the same man from in the club, now out by the bar, sitting across the room, and he was still staring at me. I looked away and pretended not to notice, but my heart was racing at this point. I contemplated whether or not to tell my sister, but I ended up not telling her. I don't know why. I left the bar and started speed walking back to my room. When I got to the stateroom halls, I was constantly glancing over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being followed. I got to my room safely. I was extremely creeped out. I had a feeling this guy was some sort of perverted creep. I got a knock at the door, and I got a little nervous. I looked through the peephole and saw my brother, so I let him in. I did not see the strange man again until late the next night. My brother and I went with my sister and her boyfriend to one of the restaurants on board at like 1 in the morning. They weren't planning on going to sleep anytime soon, so I told them I was going to crash, and I walked back to the stateroom. But when I got there, I saw that the door to our room was cracked open a bit and the light was on. I knew for sure we shut the door when we left, and there was no chance room service was in there at an hour like this. I proceeded with extreme caution and slowly pushed the door open completely. There was nobody in the room. I checked the bathroom, but it was empty too. All of our stuff was still in the same spot that I remembered it was in. I kind of just figured maybe Rob came back to the room for some reason when I wasn't with him and forgot to shut the door, so I just went to sleep. I woke up to darkness and the feeling of something brushing against my cheek. It was a hand. I pushed it away, telling Rob to knock it off, but when I noticed, even in the dark, beyond the figure by my bed, that Rob was in his bed, I let out the most blood-curdling scream you have ever heard. Rob jumped up and turned the lamp on, and there was the man from the club standing next to me. Rob jumped on him and began throwing punches. I joined in and we took down the man. It wasn't even a minute before frantic knocking came at the door. It was my parents. My dad held down the man while we called the customer service center. They sent up 2 security workers and he was sent to the jail of the ship for the remainder of the cruise. I'm not sure what happened to him afterwards, but this has emotionally scarred me, and I don't think I can ever go on another cruise again.
Home security technology has come a long way. Doorbell cameras such as Ring have become extremely popular in recent years, acting as an effective deterrent from potential robbers or any other kind of unwelcomed guests. Their ability to record video whenever someone comes within range to the front of a house or any other section of the house that they're installed in creates an added level of security to a person's home. With the millions of Ring doorbell cameras installed throughout America has come a lot of creepy footage, including the following. This first piece of footage was captured by the Ring camera in the LeMay household. It happened on a cold December night in 2019. A stranger hacked into the LeMay family's Ring security system and had watched them around their home, and for nearly 10 minutes, he interacted with 8-year-old Alyssa. Not only was he able to watch her, but he was able to communicate noises to her, as he had access to a second system placed in the girl's babysitter's room downstairs. Alyssa then heard music coming from upstairs in her bedroom, which she shared with her realized someone was watching her in the bedroom because the blue light from the Ring camera was blinking. Then, in a strange man's voice, she heard this.
Hello there.
The 8-year-old gasped and tried to figure out where the voice was coming from. She would pick up her toys to see if they were what was making the noises. She scanned the room, and moments later, the man started screaming a racial slur at her over and over, until Alyssa responded by screaming this.
What? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
The man proceeded to tell her to go call her mom the racial slur and demand that she repeat it back to him. Moments later, the voice would reply to Alyssa asking who are you by saying he's her best friend, he's Santa Claus.
Who is that?
I'm your best friend. I'm Santa Claus. I'm Santa Claus. Don't you want to be my best friend? I'm Santa Claus.
After all of this, the man tries to tell the girl she can do whatever she wants, including break things in her room.
I'm your best friend. You can do whatever you want right now. You can mess up your room. You can break your TV. You can do whatever you want.
The LeMay family, who resides in Memphis, Tennessee, hoped to use the device to keep an eye on their daughters while they played. The scary thing is that it took only a few days for the camera to be hacked. Perhaps the scariest thing is that no one knows how long he had access to the device. This could have gone on even longer if the hacker decided not to produce any sounds through the device. Put yourself in the little girl's shoes. Imagine hearing a creepy song playing in your bedroom, not knowing where it's coming from, only to realize that it's coming from a camera system that you set up in there, and that someone could be watching you. Now imagine waking up to that in the middle of the night. In another similar scenario, here's the footage from a Ring camera that was also taken over by a hacker who attempted to speak to a young girl while she was watching television.
What you watching? Hey, what show is that?
The father and homeowner, Adam Kerselik, had set up the Ring camera in his kitchen. In the footage, a voice can be heard speaking to his daughter after he momentarily leaves the room.
I've seen that show before. What season you on? Hello?
When Adam re-enters the room and opens the fridge, the voice says, "What are you eating?"
Hello? What are you eating? You hungry? What?
He looks around at first, rightfully confused as to where the voice could be coming from, though he eventually catches on and approaches the camera as he asks, "Who is this?"
Powering off. Hello. This is Ring.
Who is this? Who is this?
Adam disabled the camera shortly after the video ends, and he expressed his disappointment in Amazon's lack of security on their products. He said he was never advised to set up two-factor verification when he installed the camera 6 months prior. Because of the lack of security on the Ring devices, he has since taken down all his interior cameras. This and the Lemoy family's horror stories aren't the only ones of their kind though, as since 2019, over 10 other families in different states had reported that hackers have spoken to them through the devices. On November 12, 2019, the disturbing footage of a woman screaming for help was captured from a Ring doorbell's camera in a small neighborhood of Los Angeles around 11 p.m. The screaming is followed by a white vehicle speeding down the street with the trunk open, from which the screaming is coming from. Police were not aware of the doorbell footage until the following morning, but on the night of November 12th, they responded to a report of a possible kidnapping. Police couldn't find any evidence of a kidnapping at first. However, after the footage came to light, the LAPD reopened their investigation. A witness claims she also heard a man say, "I'm sorry," which you can hear in the video at one point. The sad thing is, this was 2 years ago, and nothing ever surfaced with this. If this was an actual kidnapping, the kidnappee was never found. This was the footage captured around 3 a.m. on a man's Ring camera. Not much more information than that was shared. However, multiple conclusions can be drawn from what's seen. It starts with a masked woman seemingly trying to enter the man's house, until she notices the doorbell camera, at which point she stares into the camera for almost 40 seconds. Halfway into her disturbing gaze into the camera, she puts on a pair of goggle-type glasses and pulls the mask covering her mouth and nose up higher onto her face, clearly trying to mask her identity as much as possible. Before she walks away, she makes several hand gestures into the camera, then turns and appears to grab something from behind one of the walls of the house. As she slowly walks away from the house, you might assume she's leaving for good. However, you can see she continues to pace back and forth in front of the house until the video hits the 2-minute mark, at which point the doorbell camera is set to stop recording. After the video ends, however, according to neighbors, the woman was seen standing outside the house for at least another 20 to 30 minutes before finally disappearing. It's not known who this woman was, whether it be a crazy stalker ex-girlfriend or someone completely random. This begs the question, what could she have wanted with the owner of the house? But given everything the woman was wearing from head to toe, it's obvious she came to that house with intentions of masking her identity. Why is a question that may never be answered. And with this last one, we see a scene that seems like it was taken straight from one of the hundreds of stories I've read on the channel. Once again, at some off hour in the night, a woman approached the front door of a Reddit user's dad's friend's house somewhere on the east coast of the United States. The woman seems to have a slight smile on her face at first, as she looks around the front door of the house all confused like. She stands there for 2 full minutes at least, acting nervous and confused, looking behind her several times in a paranoid manner. But what is most concerning about this unexpected visit was the large kitchen knife in her hand, that she looks down at several times in the footage. While the generally accepted theory on this was that the woman has some form of dementia, and while this may be a realistic explanation, this cannot be 100% confirmed simply based on the video. While it is unfortunate if she does in fact have dementia or any other sort of illness that caused her to do this, it would still be hard to imagine just how scary this would be for the owner of the house waking up in the middle of the night to this footage from his doorbell camera. Surveillance cameras in general have come a long way in providing security to people's properties. While Ring doorbell cameras continue to prove to be useful in adding a layer of defense or serving as a mental deterrent to uninvited guests, you clearly have to be cautious about setting up these cameras on the inside of your house because of the potential for hackers to gain access to them, as seen in the first 2 examples in this video.
An 18-year-old boy named Liam was home alone for a whole week when his dad and stepmom went on their honeymoon. While playing video games in his brother's old bedroom, who had since moved out, he could hear a kind of scraping noise that seemed to be coming from outside. The strange thing, this room was on the 2nd floor, so it seemed nothing but odd to hear something outside scraping against the walls. He tried to ignore it by turning the video game up louder, but the scraping sounds only became more apparent. He decided to finally look out the window, but it was too dark to really see anything. He left the window open a crack to better hear the noise if it persisted. Liam spun around to discover the window was now open and someone was crawling into the room through it. He was able to push the intruder back out the window before he could fully make it into the room, who then fell 2 stories down into the bushes below. He apparently wasn't too injured, as he was gone within minutes. During a rainy night in Central Islip on Long Island, a teenager named Ian was home alone, so he invited his friend Carl over. His friend texted that he would be over in 2 minutes. Ian prepared the video games he planned on playing with Carl and heard the gate to the backyard close. Confused as to why Carl went out back, Ian went out to the backyard. His shed door was open with the light on. As he called out Carl's name walking to the shed, the light inside the shed turned off. Simultaneously, Ian received a text from Carl saying, "I'm here." Ian responded, "Are you in the shed?" He responded back, "I'm at the front door." As Ian looked up, the door to the shed pulled shut with force. Ian ran back into his house and let Carl in. When the police responded to Ian's call, they checked the shed, found the door was back open, and that nobody was inside. "45-year-old Chris was supposed to be working late for the night, so his family went out to eat dinner without him. However, he was unexpectedly able to come home early. As a result, he had the house to himself for a few hours. He went down to his man cave in the basement to watch TV. That was when he heard the backyard basement window flap open, and someone stuck their head inside, peering around the room. He hid behind the couch until the person shut the window. Chris ran upstairs with a baseball bat and shut off all the lights. He waited in the kitchen, which was by the back door. Somebody suddenly reached their arm through the pet door in an attempt to unlock the door. Chris swung the baseball bat as hard as he could at the person's arm, causing them to scream and flee. That same night, sirens roared down the street and stopped at a neighborhood house. It turned out one of Chris's neighbors 3 doors down had been murdered, and when his wife came home, she found the house was ransacked with missing valuables everywhere. And then she found her husband, dead on the kitchen floor with a stab wound in the back of his head. A young girl named Anne was home alone one snowy Friday night. Her parents were out to dinner, and her sister was out with friends. She was taking a nap on her bed. She awoke to the thump. She was sure it came from her closet door, so she got up and bravely opened it. There didn't seem to be anyone inside, so she closed the closet and spun around. There she saw the head under the bed, the head of a man looking at her with an expressionless stare. She fell to the floor screaming. That's when the closet doors behind her opened and someone grabbed her and pulled her in. The man from under the bed emerged and approached her as she was being held down. The two of them carried her downstairs where they put tape over her mouth and tied her arms together. One checked to make sure the coast was clear before carrying her outside, where they planned to put her in their car's trunk. However, about halfway to their car, a large group of teenagers came riding down on their bikes and witnessed it all. Some of them were screaming for help, while some of them got off their bikes and started to slowly approach the two men. They knew they wouldn't get away with it now, so they dropped Anne, jumped into their car, and sped away. She was completely awake and conscious throughout all of this. It's unknown why they didn't just tie her up while she was sleeping. The most realistic possibility is that they simply wanted to scare the girl. This may seem like a crazy, rare occurrence, and you may even call it fake. However, things like this happen all the time and are shown commonly on the news. Perhaps they're just the stories we forget about. "22-year-old Garber still lived with his parents. He was the youngest of 3, so his 2 siblings had already moved out and his parents were out 3 to 4 nights a week. This one particular stormy night, He was home alone in his room when he could swear he heard something hit his window. It wasn't insanely weird, as the weather was pretty bad and something may have just blown into his window. However, a second thud at the window sent his heart racing. He lifted his blind and could see somebody standing out there. Even through the damp windows and the pouring rain, he knew he did not recognize that person. He shut the blinds to send the message to go away. However, he wasn't even able to move away from the windowsill before something else was thrown at the window. Garber opened the blind, and this time even the window, and shouted, "What do you want?" The man down below called back, "Come outside, I want to show you something." Garber went downstairs to call the police. They asked him if he was sure that he didn't know the person and if they had caused any damage. The 911 operator asked Garber to call back if the person continued to harass him or showed signs of wanting to break in. Garber hung up the phone. He wanted to see a better view from down in the kitchen, so he opened the kitchen blinds. Garber called the police right back and informed them that the man was standing at his kitchen window and to send somebody right away. The next time he looked back at the kitchen window, the man was gone. That was the last time Garber ever saw that man. I hope you found this video interesting, scary, or just entertaining. If you'd like to hear more Home Alone stuff, I do have a video about 10 true Home Alone stories.
There's a YouTuber by the name of Dan Bell, who's known for exploring abandoned places on his own and getting it on video. The purpose of these videos is not to catch paranormal footage, but simply to explore these places. However, in this specific video of his, a number of unsettling events take place that would make most people run for the exit. This video was shot at an abandoned children's asylum, and you can tell the eerie vibes from the place from just outside. Dan's camera battery inexplicably explodes in his hands, which is only the start of the strange occurrences.
Shit! Fucking battery exploded.
Soon after, without even knowing it, Dan is being stalked by an unknown presence. In this shot, you can see what looks like the shadow of someone's arm making a motion as if they had just told someone to shush. In a follow-up shot in an adjacent room, if you look closely, you can notice something peering in through the doorknob hole to this door. Exactly 1 minute later in the video, what looks like a white figure can be seen peering at the camera as Dan turns. And when his hand moves away, you can see the figure is gone. This white figure might match the white figure that peered through the doorknob hole. And finally, when Dan finds himself in a room with blood on the floor, you can hear a voice in the next room over, saying what most closely resembles "Let's get him."
Oh my god, I'm gonna fucking freak out.
Dan had a theory of his own as to what was following him around in there.
I think that a former patient has returned to this facility, to this house, and is living here in one of the rooms upstairs.
Others believe there may have been more than one person in there, and that they had some kind of white sheets over their heads to hide their identities, planning on robbing him or worse. Powlee's Island is a small town in South Carolina, which by the immediate looks of it is a very peaceful place. but there is a story that many of the locals swear by, known as the Gray Man. Many locals claim they have seen the Gray Man, and some go as far as to say that any time the Gray Man has been spotted, a hurricane has swept through the island shortly after. All sightings of the Gray Man have been on the coast. There are many pictures online which have allegedly caught the Gray Man, but this one video captured by a Coast Guard surveillance camera captures a strange gray apparition moving down the boardwalk, and this was captured during Hurricane Florence. YouTuber by the name of Time to Play TV decided to spend the night at an allegedly haunted hotel in Georgia, the Riverview Hotel.
As you know, this is where we went to. This place that the video you're about to see is a haunted hotel. It was made in like 1916 by 3 women who had it built, and then they ran it, and they obviously eventually have passed away. And then I guess the sightings started happening after they started passing away. People would see a woman in the hallway, stuff would move, stuff would happen, and people would say, hey, that's the girl I saw. The pictures on the wall is the woman I saw.
His plan was to set up a camcorder in the room while he slept and try to capture any paranormal footage. Unbeknownst to him until after his visit, a visitor had recently died in that exact room he stayed in. Before even setting up his camcorder, strange things already started to occur, like the fan turning on and off and the bathroom door shutting on its own.
My fan has shut off and turned back on. See that? Now the fan and the light are both plugged in behind the bed, and they're connected. So that shuts them both off. You hear the fan shut off? And the fan by itself is turned off, I want to say, maybe 2 or 3 times. The bathroom door over there, it's closed. Now, I don't mean a little bit. I mean, it's fully closed. Now, the reason it's open now is because I thought maybe a breeze, maybe something. There's no windows open. I got nothing going on, and that thing right there is just closed all by itself. It's closing right now, guys. It just moved a little bit. I'm telling you, it just... See that? There's no one in here with me. Completely alone. No? There is no one here, guys. I'm using the front facing the camera, so it's kind of hard to see. But you can see. Watch. Watch. See, it's a watch. It doesn't close by itself.
Then night came, and upon checking the footage the next morning, he could see things were just as strange overnight. Not only the chair, but also the entire bed moves. He decides he's not going back to sleep. Whether this was an elaborate hoax or truly a haunted hotel room is up to you to decide. It's It's the story everyone's heard 100 times already. A house nestled in the Long Island town of Amityville, which will forever be linked to what is known as the Amityville horror phenomenon. On November 13th, 1974, the estate was the scene of a mass murder. Ronald J. DeFeo Jr., who was 23 at the time, shot and killed with a rifle his entire family while they were asleep, which included his parents and 4 siblings. 13 months later, the Lutz family purchased the 5-bedroom, 3.5-bathroom home at a drastically reduced price of $80,000. But they only lasted 28 days before leaving it due to strange phenomenon, including George Lutz, the father, waking up at 3 a.m. every morning, which was around the time Ron DeFeo carried out his murders, and the youngest daughter, Missy, beginning to speak to an imaginary young entity in the house. A camera investigation was conducted of the house, and out of all the pictures taken, one stood out the most. The boy in this picture is commonly thought to represent the youngest DeFeo family member who was murdered in the house, and also the entity that Missy had been communicating with. This is another video uploaded by a YouTuber who decided to venture out alone to an allegedly haunted abandoned building. This time, a house in a rural part of Japan, seemingly in the middle of the woods. While scoping the perimeter of the house, the cameraman is suddenly startled by this.
音がやばい。何うわ、何手じゃない今。ねえ、ちょっと待って、手打つんなかった今。ねえ。
A hand can be seen grabbing the corner of the house, causing the man to flee. Even after this, though, apparently the cameraman is still determined enough to enter the house to continue with the investigation, against anyone's better judgment.
なんか聞こえる。うわ、ちょっと待って。なんか聞こえるんだけど。何？嘘。うわ、聞こえた。うわ、聞こえちゃった。どうしよう。うわ、ちょっと待って。
Shortly after entering the basement, this is what the camera catches.
裏側。ねえ。いや、マジでやばい。なんかいる。絶対いる。何？
The cameraman was clearly being stalked by someone in this house. By who remains a mystery. Some reactions to the video even suggest that it may have been the ghost of someone who formerly lived there. I'm 30 years old, and I share a house with my sister. It's a 2-floor house, a mother-daughter house, meaning it has 2 kitchens. My sister takes the downstairs, I take the upstairs. My sister isn't home a lot because she often stays with her boyfriend who lives 20 miles away. Like I said, I'm 30. I shouldn't let being home alone ever freak me out. But, admittedly, sometimes it does. This happened on a night that I was home alone in my living room watching a scary movie. My part of the house is an open layout, so the living room, dining room, and kitchen are all one big space. My couch is in the middle of the space, so as I watch TV on the couch, my back is to a large part of the room behind me. So for those a little more easily spooked, it wouldn't be the most comfortable place to be sitting alone watching a scary movie. I'll admit, as I watched in the dark room with nothing but the light from the TV to cancel the darkness of the room, I found myself glancing over my shoulder a lot. I like to think I'm not the only 30-year-old male that does that. But anyway, after the movie, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights in the house, then went to sleep. My sleep lasted for about 2 hours. I woke up around 1 a.m., and I wasn't sure why I woke up at first. Then I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like my sister. It sounded like she was inside the house, so it's not like she was calling for me to open the door. But still, I knew it was my sister's voice. I didn't know what she was yelling up to me though, but I was still groggy and not thinking straight. All I could think was that she must have been calling for me, or arguing with her boyfriend. So I got out of bed and went into the pitch black hall. I turned on the hallway lights and then made my way through the living room and heard my sister's voice again from downstairs. Now I could understand her to be saying my name. I made my way downstairs in the dark, yelling back at her, "What is it?" I looked for the light switch in the foyer downstairs, but couldn't find it. I'm not lying when I say I was groggy as hell. I walked down her little hallway towards her kitchen, find a light switch, and flick it on. The light in the kitchen lights up her little apartment, including her living room. The light starts off dim and needs time to brighten up, but I still saw that there was no one down there. Not her, not her boyfriend. I went to her bedroom, but it was empty. I called her name really loudly one time. No one called back, but shortly after I yelled, I heard something drop to the floor in my sister's bedroom, which I had just checked, and it was empty. I went back up the stairs like a little kid and went back to my bed to where my phone was. I tried to call her a few times, but she didn't pick up. I had myself locked in my room, wondering if I had just hallucinated all of that. Eventually I fell asleep, and in the morning I woke up to text from my sister asking why I called her at 1 a.m. I asked her if she was home last night, and she told me no, she was currently staying at her boyfriend's house. I went downstairs to her bedroom to see what may have fallen down on the floor, but there was not a single object on the floor that could have made that noise. I'm led to believe I hallucinated everything I heard that night, but that's what I want to believe, because the alternative would be much more horrific. But I've never really hallucinated anything else, or had any kind of sleep disorders, so how vividly I heard my sister's voice, and that sound in her room, really freaks me out. I was left home alone a lot as a kid, just due to the fact that my mom was single for a good chunk of my upbringing, and she worked as an RN on a crappy RN schedule, and my brother went away to college. This was a night that my mom was working an overnight. It was a weekend night, so I had this girl Molly over who I was talking to, and she hung out for a while. We watched a couple movies and whatnot, and eventually she had to go home because her parents don't like her out late, so I was left alone to hold down the fort. I continued to watch TV in my room and bed. My bedroom is upstairs next to the backyard, so when someone dragged one of the chairs on the deck outside, I heard it. I got up and looked out the window, and I saw someone sitting on one of the deck chairs down below. I called Molly's name thinking it was her. After all, she'd only left under 10 minutes ago. Whoever it was looked up at me, but it wasn't Molly. I immediately pulled away from the window to hide. That was not anybody I recognized. Not in the darkness, at least. I texted a few close friends in our group chat if it was one of them messing with me. The ones who answered all said no, and asked what I was talking about. I didn't really believe any of my friends would come to my house to mess with me like that anyway. Scared shitless, but still curious, I slowly walked back over to the window to look down again, and that person was still sitting in the chair, looking up at my window. It was a he, that much was clear, and he definitely saw me. I hurried away from the window again to turn off the TV. I sat in my bed in a ball basically, with my arms wrapped around my knees. I waited in darkness for a while. I didn't even want to turn my phone screen on because I was scared he'd see the light. I didn't even want to move because the window was opened and I feared that he'd hear any movement I made. I wanted him to assume I was just no longer in the bedroom. I waited enough time. It had to be a solid 5 minutes of just sitting there. I highly doubted that man outside could still be there. I finally mustered up the courage to get up and look out the window. I felt a little part of me die inside when I saw he was still down there, looking up at my window. Instead of running away from the window again, I tried to be brave and said down to him, "What do you want?" I then noticed his shoulders started to go up and down as if he were laughing really hard, but he didn't make any kind of audible laughing sounds at first, till I heard a slight whistling sound coming from him. It seemed like he was laughing so hard that he was wheezing. I asked him to please go away, then walked away from the window again. I went back to my bed. I was scared to call the police for some reason. I left my room and sat at the top of the stairway listening. The back door was being pushed. He was trying to get into the house. I ran back to my room to hide again. I was 14, I didn't know what else to do. Eventually I heard the front door's doorknob being fiddled with, and the man trying to push the front door open as well. He gave up quickly, thank God. I closed my bedroom window and curtains. If our doors weren't locked, I could have been killed easily. I was skinny and weak when I was 14 and definitely not a fighter. I didn't leave my room again that night until my mom got home around 9. I told her what happened, and her reaction was angry at me for not calling 911, and in hindsight that was very stupid of me. One of the many things I did, or rather didn't do at a young age, that I question greatly. This was the story of how I almost died as a young kid home alone, and possibly the most intense night of my life with way too much going on. We're a family of 5. I was 10 at the time. My older brother was 14, my little sister was 5. It was a Friday night. My brother was out with his friends causing trouble clearly, because a dreaded phone call came to my parents. All I remember was I was in my room playing a Star Wars video game when I heard my mom start freaking out crying. I got really scared and hurried to see what was wrong. My mom was on the phone with the hospital, calling to inform my parents that my brother had gotten hit by a car. Obviously, we were all shaken and really scared. My brother's leg was broken, but I don't know what else was said on the phone. All I know is my parents hurried to get their coats on and got my little sister from her room and asked me if I was okay to stay home alone. I said yes, and they hurried out to the car and left. I was of course really worried for my brother, but I really didn't want to go to the hospital and see him in any kind of bad condition. I don't think my parents wanted me or my sister to either, but they didn't want to leave my 5-year-old sister home without them. It's worth mentioning my brother recovered just fine, as his injury is no longer relevant to the story, other than it being the reason why I was left home alone on a Friday night. Before my dad left, he was trying to calm down my mom, telling her he was going to be okay. So seeing my dad like that made me feel better. I had a feeling my mom was just being overdramatic like any mom would be. I continued playing the Star Wars game for a couple more hours when I heard the front door open. I had my bedroom door closed. By this point, it was easily past midnight and past my bedtime, so I turned off the TV and PlayStation and crawled into my bed with my Game Boy. I tried listening to hear my parents' voices, maybe hear if my brother was with them or just hear what they were saying, but I didn't hear anything. After a few minutes of not hearing them even come up the stairs, I had a feeling something was wrong. I went to my door and quietly opened it, then walked over to the ledge and banister that overlooked the living room. The lights were off, but there were 3 tall people standing in my living room. They weren't my family. I was so petrified that I was frozen for a second before I could quietly walk back into my room and shut the door as quietly as I could in my trepidation. But it wasn't quiet enough, and I knew it. They had to have heard the door click shut even if just slightly. I hurried to my closet door, opened it quietly, stepped inside, then shut the door. I had myself sitting behind a bunch of the boxes and bags of clothes that were stuffed in my closet. I was actually pretty covered from view. There was this short period that felt like forever that I was anticipating my bedroom door open, and it did. And at that moment, I knew I was going to die. I heard footsteps walk into the room. I couldn't tell how many people. It may have been 1, it may have been 2. I heard the footsteps move to my bed. Then I heard my covers being played with. Then silence. Then more footsteps towards the closet door. Then silence for a few seconds. And then the closet door opened. My heart was in my throat by this point. All I did was sit quietly and hold my breath. The door was open for a really long time, but I didn't look up. I didn't move. It had to be a good 20 seconds of silence before the door closed again. Footsteps walked away from the door, then out of the room. I finally looked up, and I just realized, from where I was crouched down behind the bags and boxes, I may have been visible to that person. It wasn't until probably an hour that I heard my parents return. I ran downstairs to them. The front door was left ajar by the people who broke in, and they had stolen a number of valuables from our house. It was a night that just went from bad to worse for our family. My parents were in such a rush when they left for the hospital that they apparently didn't even lock the door. I was lucky to have not been killed or kidnapped. I look back now and really wonder if the person who opened the closet and just stood there for 20 seconds saw me hiding in there. Maybe he was just a guy that came to rob a house, not to kidnap or hurt a child. Or maybe he just didn't see me, and I just narrowly escaped death or injury. I was home alone for an entire week one time when I was still a teenager living with my parents, which was a rare occasion since my parents don't go out a lot. My mom's rich friend Patty invited my parents on a trip that she was paying for. I'm an only child, so I was left alone in the house. We lived in Newark, Ohio, which is in Licking County. Yes, our county was actually called Licking County. My parents' old house had woods in the backyard and was on some quiet road that only a few cars would pass per day usually. We had a huge deck in the backyard overlooking the woods and a decently large backyard. We even had a little fish pond and above-ground swimming pool. This was on a Thursday night. I remember because I had conversations with friends about plans for the weekend that day. This was in July of 2013. I was out on the deck smoking weed with my speaker playing music. That's about the time it started. I thought I heard a voice from out in the woods. I lowered the music and listened for a little bit. It didn't repeat, so I raised it back up. When the music was loud again, I heard a voice from out in the woods again. This time I turned the music off completely and listened for longer. There was a voice calling from the woods again, confirming I wasn't just hearing things. It was a male's voice, saying, "Hey, over here." It was kind of distant, but not too far. The woods were anywhere from 20 to 30 yards away from the deck, and that's where the voice was coming from. I didn't think in a million years it was someone calling out for me though, rather maybe just some kids playing manhunt or something. The voice called out again, "Hey, over here, we need help." This time I realized the voice was too deep to be a kid. And when a voice yells out, "We need help," obviously that'll always be slightly concerning. I was getting a little bit uncomfortable now, because now I was questioning if these yells were directed at me. Now I heard the voice yell, "Straight in front of you, please come help us." And the voice was coming from straight in front of me in the woods. Now I had a feeling this was directed at me. I reluctantly called back, "Who is that?" And they responded, "We just need help, we're stuck in the woods." I called back, "What does that mean?" And the voice replied back, "Just please come help, straight in front of you." I got out from my seat, walked down the steps of the deck onto the grass, and proceeded towards the woods. I called out, "I'm coming, where are you?" The voice replied instantly, "Right in front of you, I see you." I replied back, "Wait, are you alone or with someone?" There was no answer this time. I stopped in my tracks about halfway towards the woods. I had a bad feeling in my gut about this. I started walking backwards, back towards the house and the deck. I didn't even want to turn my back to the woods, because it took me that long to realize there was something very suspicious about this situation. I made it back to the deck, and the voice didn't say anything else. If they truly saw me and this was real, they would have said something like, "Where are you going?" at the very least. They knew I was onto the situation, but who even knows how many people were in there? Could have been one, could have been three. All I know is getting stuck in the woods makes absolutely no sense, especially if he or they were able to literally see me. Like what? Did their shirt get caught on a branch? I went inside the house and locked all the doors just to be safe. I chilled in my living room for a bit, still high, and I think that's why I was more trusting at first, because of how high and relaxed I was. Then though, I heard the voice again from outside, closer now. Definitely in the backyard and not the woods anymore. I heard splashing of water. It could have been the pool or the pond. I hurried to the window to see. I didn't see anyone at first, but then the voice called, "I see you," with a laugh. I noticed him. It was one guy, at least one guy visible. He was hidden behind the pool on the other side, and I could only see his head. It was just too dark to make out anything besides his dark, medium-length hair. I closed the blinds and tried to ignore it. Maybe he'd lose interest if he saw I wasn't entertaining him. He was probably a sick, deranged person who enjoyed messing with people, so I didn't want to give him what he wanted. But my breaking point was when there was a horrible, aggressive banging on the window where I had just closed the blinds, and on the other side, the guy was screaming help. I screamed at the top of my lungs to "Fuck off, you freak, the police are coming." I screamed it over and over, trying to make myself sound crazier than him. I heard him start to laugh on the other side of the glass. His laughing started to fade away as I assume he walked away. I sat back down on the couch, trembling, shaking, out of breath. I sat there for a while, and it seemed like the guy had really given up. I still got a good night's sleep that night because weed helps me sleep. I wonder if I would have handled that situation any differently if I wasn't high though. The situation made me more paranoid about who I opened my door to. I'm 23 years old, and I live at home with my parents still. One day they were both not home, and I was outside playing basketball in the front yard. At some point while I was playing, I looked up at one of our upstairs windows and saw a woman standing there. Not my mom, not my sister. It was a random woman. I guess when she saw me looking at her, she dipped away from the window. When I went inside and upstairs to check the lounge room, she wasn't anywhere. I checked every single room I could, every bedroom, the bathroom, every closet. Then I checked the downstairs, which included the living room, kitchen, dining room, one bedroom, and more closets. Finally, I checked the basement, and I highly doubted she could be down there. It's a small basement with a couple couches, a bar, and 2 closets. There weren't many places for someone to hide, but when I opened the second closet door, I was incredibly scared, as I didn't know of any other places someone could be hiding in the house. This was the last unchecked spot that I could think of. I yanked the door open as if I were ripping off a band-aid, and like I did with the closet before this one, I right away pushed myself into the closet just in case that woman was in there and I'd have the jump on her. But all I pushed myself into was a bunch of coats and coat hangers. I was so confused. I wasn't going to question my sanity though. I definitely saw that woman and I knew it. It wasn't the kind of thing you would just so vividly imagine. I went back to the middle floor and screamed very loud that whoever was in the house needs to get the F out. I actually screamed so loud that our next door neighbor came over and asked if I was okay. I told him that I literally just saw a woman at our upstairs window watching me play basketball. He came in and helped me search again. When we couldn't find her, I was left to assume that she snuck out through the back door, which I did unlock after all when I went to grab the basketball from the yard. So my neighbor left. I locked all the doors, called my parents, and told them the crazy story, and they weren't too thrilled. But they asked me to make sure nothing was stolen. I did just that, and luckily it seemed anything that was worth something was still in place. So now fast forward to that night. I went to sleep after checking the house one more time just for peace of mind. It was hard to fall asleep though. My mind was racing for obvious reasons. Most people can't relate to seeing a stranger at their window inside of their house. But my restlessness helped me out in this situation, and here's why. I was finally starting to drift away slightly. Then I heard some noises from the other side of me. I had the fan on above me, so the room wasn't dead silent, and that's why I didn't immediately turn to my other side at the first sound I heard. But the sound started to sound human-like. I turned to my other side, and there she was, getting out from under my bed. She stood up tall above the bed, and I screamed so loud, louder than earlier before. I jumped out of my bed and tackled her to the floor and had my hand around her throat, asking her who she was. My doorbell rang, my neighbor again. I picked the tall, dirty-looking woman up off the floor and dragged her to the front door with me as she struggled and scratched at me. I still have 2 scars on my right arm from her claws. I opened my front door to my neighbor again, and he let himself in and helped me restrain the woman. This was when I called the police. The whole time we waited for the police, the woman was screaming and cursing at my neighbor and I, threatening us too. The best way to put it, she looked and acted like a meth head currently suffering from withdrawals. When the police arrived, one of the officers knew exactly who the woman was. They had dealt with her multiple times before. Her name was conveniently Karen. It was satisfying to watch her be brought into the back of the police car. I let my neighbor know how grateful I was for him coming so quickly to help. And that night, my mind continued to race. But instead of being completely freaked out, which I still was a little, I felt this overwhelming feeling of satisfaction. and I can't fully explain why. Ever since I can remember, we've always had one of those old vintage Parker Brother Ouija boards sitting in our closet collecting dust. When I was a kid, I always wondered what it was. From the box, it seemed like a horrible board game, until one day I found out what a Ouija board really is, and immediately dug it out of the closet. I insisted on my brother trying it out with me, and eventually got him to play along. We put our hands on the planchette, and I began asking the typical cliche questions like, "Is there anybody there?" and "Can you answer me?" Other than my brother jokingly moving the planchette around to imitate an answer from some kind of entity, there was no real response. After getting bored, we put the game back in the box. I did a little research that night to find out how to make Ouija boards work. Many people said online that the most ideal environment when using a Ouija board is in a dark room only lit by candles. So when my parents weren't home, I managed to gather like 6 or 7 candles and convinced my brother to try it one more time. I lit the candles and set them around the table in the dining room with all the lights out. We tried one more time. I asked again if there was anybody there. The planchette began to move. I told my brother to stop moving it, but he swore he wasn't. I told him to move his hand away, and he did. It kept moving. My brother thought I was messing with him, but I didn't pay attention. The planchette landed on the word yes. I was only 9, so I was legitimately shitting myself. My older brother had to take over. He asked the question, "Are you a good spirit?" There was a 5-second pause before my brother's hand moved along with the planchette to the word no. We both looked at each other, and at this point I ran to my room and shut the door behind me, but he continued on with the so-called game. I heard his muffled voice come from down in the dining room, when all of a sudden I heard him screaming at the top of his lungs. I ran back downstairs to see what was wrong. He was holding up his shirt, revealing a small open wound that almost looked like a claw mark. He told me to set the fireplace immediately, and I obeyed. He threw the thing in the fireplace and told me to never speak of what happened to anybody. We have never used a Ouija board since. I got a call from my cousin who said that he, his brother, his dad, and his best friend were using a Ouija board in their basement. Prior to starting, they took a large porcelain doll out of the room because it was creepy, and placed it in the adjacent room face down on a pile of towels. My cousin took a short break because the board was just spouting nonsense and he had to go to the bathroom. His dad and brother and friends started asking the board questions without him. One of the questions was, who is in the other room? It just started spouting random numbers, and when my cousin came back into the room, his brother said that it wasn't working, that they were going to put it away, and he showed him the answer to the last question he asked, and he said, "Dude, that's my social security number." Then they started to talk to whatever started spewing answers out. It told my cousin he would die in the Air Force. At this point, they tell the entity they're communicating with to prove itself. It then spelled out the word doll, and they immediately got a bad feeling. They opened the door to check on the porcelain doll they had laid in the other room, and when they opened the door, the doll was standing up right in front of the door, staring at them. Everyone freaked out and ran out of the house. His best friend burned the Ouija board, and I think he temporarily went nuts for a few months. My cousin, for some reason, then joined the Air Force, and is on a base in Europe now. I had some of my friends over one night, so we tried out the Ouija board we found in someone's garbage. It had the board and the glass piece that you hold onto. The 4 of us held onto the piece and asked stupid questions, just messing around. At all times, one of us were moving around the glass piece just to try and fool the others. When one of my friends went to the bathroom and the other got bored, it was just me and one of my other friends still holding onto it.
I asked the board when I will die, and the piece started slowly moving to the letter T. I laughed, looking at my friend, thinking it was him, but he just told me that he thought it was me. The piece then moved to the letter O, and then M, and then back to O, and then R, and then I realized that it was spelling out the word tomorrow. My friend let go of it, and it stopped moving, so I was convinced that it was him, but he swore left and right it wasn't him. But here's where it gets horrifying. The next day, while walking my dog to the preserve, my dog's collar suddenly snapped and he was free from the leash. He darted into the road and I immediately chased after him, only to hear the horn of an oncoming car blaring and getting louder. I dove as fast as I could out of the way, just barely grazing the car with my foot as it passed. But it didn't end there. The same day, while sitting under the ceiling fan in the kitchen on full blast, I got up to get something out of the fridge, and behind me, I heard a loud crashing sound as all the glass on the table was shattered and everything fell onto the floor. The fan had fallen off the ceiling, and I was inches away from being decapitated. I really don't know if I find it to be a coincidence that the day after the Ouija board said I would die the next day, that I had 2 near-death experiences. All I know is I'm never touching a Ouija board again. I have never really told people about this. We had a huge closet full of old board games, and one of them happened to be a Ouija board. I always wanted to try it out, but my family was always home, and I felt weird trying it in front of them. There was this one weekend that my parents were going to the city, and my brother was going on a Boy Scout campout, so I would have the whole house to myself for a weekend. It might have been pathetic that I was more excited to try out a Ouija board than to party with friends while the house was empty. The weather was terrible, windy and rainy, but I felt that a rainy night would actually make it more ritualistic. Around midnight, I set up the board in my dining room and dimmed the lights. I asked a bunch of questions that generated no answers, so I eventually put the board away and went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to hear a creaking noise downstairs by the front door. At first I thought nothing of it, but then I heard it again, and it was closer this time, closer to the stairs. I sat up now. At this point I was getting concerned. Another creaking sound, this time from one of the stairs. I was sure somebody was in my house. This was before cell phones were mainstream, so calling the police wasn't even an option. The creaking sounds were getting closer until they were right outside my door, and then they just stopped. It felt like hours while I laid there clutching my covers, waiting for something to happen. A huge strike of lightning momentarily lit up my bedroom, and I swore I could see some kind of black limb-type objects wrapped around the open door. I tried to hold my breath to be as quiet as possible, but what happened next was the worst part. My door suddenly slammed shut, and I couldn't help but let out a shriek. By now I was completely under my covers, shaking and crying and wanting to scream. All the windows in the house were closed, so there was no draft. I just knew something was going to happen. But nothing happened. I sat under my covers for hours, thinking somebody or something was in the room with me. When the sun started to rise, I finally snuck a peek out of my covers. My room was just as empty as before. I somehow found the courage to leave my bedroom and search for any signs of a break-in. Everything looked normal though. No broken windows or unlocked doors. I then spotted the Ouija board on the table again. I have always been kind of superstitious, so I immediately linked the happenings to the Ouija board. I chucked the damn thing in the outside trash can and brought it out front to the curb. Since then, nothing has happened, and I didn't tell anybody about it. You wouldn't understand unless you were in that kind of situation. Then you would agree that nobody would believe a word you say. Nobody really knows except for the people that read my story online. I know for a fact that those events were linked to the Ouija board. I can tell you from personal experience that trying a Ouija board is a huge mistake. It was the summer of 2013. My friend had a vintage Ouija board that was allegedly worth a decent amount of money. My friend agreed to trade it with me for a video game that I never played, so I happily made the trade. I tried using it alone, but it proved to be just a scam. I didn't really expect it to work. I mainly got it just for the money to be made off of it. I threw the stupid thing on the floor of my living room and forgot about it. Everything was going normal until the next morning. I woke up and found that the 2 plants I had sitting on my coffee table had been knocked over, and the Ouija board was sitting on the table. I didn't remember putting it there, nor did I understand how the plants could have fallen over. Wind was definitely not an answer. I wondered if it was possible that I had sleepwalked, or maybe I was half awake and walked down to get a glass of water and bumped into them or something. I moved everything back in place, but the carpet already had dirt stains on it. I brought the Ouija board box up to my room and tossed it on the floor. Things got bad that night. While laying awake in the dark, I was disturbed by the sound of a muffled click. I looked up, not sure what it was, and then I saw through the cracks of my closet door that my closet light was on. I had no idea how it could have turned on, but I got up and opened the closet door anyway. There was nobody in there, but that hadn't even crossed my mind. I turned the light off and jumped back into bed. Probably 10 minutes later, I heard the same clicking sound. Naturally, I looked to the closet and felt my heart sink a little. The closet light was on again. A mix of confusion and fear started building up inside of me. I once again turned off the light and cautiously got back in my bed. I found myself waiting for the closet light to click on again, but what happened instead was much worse. Instead of the closet light turning on, the whole room suddenly filled with light as I heard the main light switch flick on. I had seen enough and was out the door within seconds. I quickly pieced things together and chucked that old Ouija board in the closest dumpster. Nothing weird ever happened after that.
These are 6 of some of the creepiest and most disturbing science experiments throughout human history. Number 6. The concept has become almost a staple in science fiction: mind control. However, what if it's not as fictional as you may have thought? Scientists at the University of California were able to develop cyborg beetles by implanting electronic components into the beetles' cocoons. The insects could then actually be controlled via a remote control and instructed how and where to fly, almost like an RC helicopter. The experiment was then pushed a stage further when the military started to experiment on rats and implemented heat sensors and small cameras onto the tiny creatures. The military's main goal with this is to create a means of conducting safer search and rescue missions or for surveillance using the rats and beetles. Essentially, the scientists turned neurons in the rats' brains on and off using different colors of light. The really creepy part is that scientists believe this opens up the possibility for potential human mind control in the near future. Number 5. For decades, the Soviet Union actually created and maintained a secret lab known as the Chamber, Laboratory 1, and Laboratory 12, which led a sinister program to devise new methods of poisoning people. Beginning in 1921 and continuing for most of the 21st century, the chamber was used as a covert research facility for secret police agencies. Prisoners from Russian labor camps, or gulags, were exposed to a number of deadly poisons in the chamber, including mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, and more. The purpose of which was to find a tasteless, odorless chemical that could not be detected in a dead body. Men and women of varying ages and physical conditions were brought to the laboratories, where they were given the poisons which would be mixed into a meal or drink, or served as a medication. Eventually, a preparation with the scientist's desired properties was developed, and it was called C2. C2 was not detectable post-mortem, and according to witness testimonies, a victim who was given C2 changed physically, becoming shorter and weaker, and after falling silent and calm, died within only 15 minutes. People of varied physical conditions and ages were brought to the labs in order to have a more complete picture for the action of each poison. In addition to human experimentation, the scientists would also execute every prisoner brought down to the lab who survived the poisonous effects.
Number 4. The Stanford Prison Experiments. Conducted at Stanford University on the morning of August 17, 1971, a group of young men in the Palo Alto area received visits from local police officers and were arrested for armed robbery and burglary. Their neighbors watched on as the young men were searched, handcuffed, and forced into the back of the police cars, not realizing that it was all part of a prearranged setup. The students were taken to a Palo Alto police station where they were booked, fingerprinted, moved to a holding cell, and blindfolded. Finally, they were transported to the Stanford University Psychology Department, or as it was referred to for the experiments, the Stanford County Prison. The point of the experiment was to essentially demonstrate how authority and power dynamics affect a human being's capacity for evil. 24 male students of Stanford University were chosen and randomly assigned roles of either prisoners or guards, and the so-called Stanford County Prison was just a mock-designed prison in the basement of the Stanford Psychology building. Those who were assigned as guards began to humiliate and psychologically abuse the assigned prisoners with little to no instruction to even do so. Some of the guards would do pointlessly cruel things to the prisoners, for instance waking them up at off hours of the night and forcing them to do jumping jacks, or threatening them with batons, and much worse. The prisoners in turn became submissive and depersonalized, taking the abuse and saying very little in protest. When prisoners would request to leave the experiments, they would be told this is a real prison environment and they could not leave. A few prisoners started to experience slight mental breakdowns within a few days and were only then allowed to leave the experiments.
God damn it! Fucked up! You don't know, I mean, God! I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside, don't you know? I just fucking can't take it. I feel so fucked up inside, I feel really fucked up inside, you don't know, I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I can't say that, I'm fucked up, I don't know how to explain it, I'm all fucked up inside!
The behavior of everyone involved became so extreme that the experiment, which was meant to last 2 weeks, was terminated after 6 days. Number 3. For you animal lovers out there, this one may be a little disturbing. In 1940, Russian scientists released a video of their experiments which involved severed dog heads being kept alive for several hours. The severed heads would wiggle their ears in response to sounds and even lick their mouths. The scientists who were behind the experiment claimed they were able to keep the animals alive by attaching an artificial blood circulation system to the head. But that was just the first time that scientists had created these so-called zombie dogs. In 2005, American scientists tried again by flushing all the blood from the dogs' bodies and replacing it with oxygen and sugar-filled saline. 3 hours later, after the team gave the dogs a blood transfusion and an electric shock, the dogs were back from the dead with fully animated severed heads, with one even allegedly regaining consciousness. There's only footage of the 1940 experiment that's available on the internet. If it makes you feel any better, the experiments kind of had good intentions, as this kind of treatment could apparently one day save people from hemorrhaging blood too quickly. Number 2. During the time of the Holocaust, the Nazis decided to perform several experiments on humans, causing the victims to suffer to unbearable degrees, and for the most part resulted in death. These torturous experiments were done on concentration camp prisoners during World War II, most of whom were Jews. One of the most feared doctors during this time was Josef Mengele, who was also known as the Angel of Death. He lived in the Auschwitz concentration camp, and what he enjoyed most was experimenting with the genetics of twins and people with deformities. He experimented on over 1,000 pairs of twins, with only about 200 surviving the experiments. However, survivors of the experiments didn't live long regardless, as most were killed anyway. The Nazis wanted to know if a person's joints and limbs could be removed and transplanted into someone else. These cruel experiments led to scores of concentration camp prisoners having limbs needlessly amputated. The aim was to study the regeneration of bones, muscles, and nerves. Every attempt to transplant a limb or joint was a failure. Many were killed, mutilated, and exposed to excruciating pain.
sections of muscle, bone, and nerves were also removed in fruitless attempts to regenerate those body parts. Other horrific Nazi experiments also consisted of forcing victims to drink seawater in hopes that they would find a way to make seawater drinkable, but failed every single time. Scientists forced victims to drink only seawater and deprived them of all food and fresh water. The experiment became so unbearable that some victims actually licked a freshly mopped floor just to get a small amount of fresh water. Number 1. There have been many reports of North Korean human experimentation of prisoners in gas chambers, testing deadly chemical weapons, and surgery without anesthesia. These reports show human rights abuses similar to those of Nazi and Japanese human experimentation in World War II. The North Korean government of course denies these allegations and claims that all prisoners in North Korea are humanely treated. One former North Korean female prisoner shared what she witnessed, claiming 50 healthy women prisoners were selected and given poisoned cabbage leaves, which all the women were forced to eat despite cries of distress from those who had already eaten them. According to the woman, all 50 were dead after 20 minutes of vomiting blood. Now all 50 women ate the leaf, as refusing to do so would have meant that they and their families would be severely punished. Kwon Hyuk, who was a former prison head of security at Camp 22, described laboratories equipped respectively for poison gas, suffocation gas, and blood experiments in which 3 or 4 people, sometimes families, are the experimental subjects. After undergoing medical checks, the chambers are sealed and the poison is injected through a tube, while scientists observe from the outside. Kwon even stated, "I saw an entire family being killed. They were put in the gas chamber where they all suffocated. The last to die was the youngest son." Kwon stated the parents tried to save the children using mouth-to-mouth resuscitation for as long as they had the strength, and that it was the most horrific and evil thing he had ever seen. Number 5. It's been estimated that nationwide there are 600,000 ski-related injuries per year and an average of 54 deaths per year. The most common causes of death or injury while skiing are hitting a tree or falling off a cliff. 54% of these deaths occurred on beginner-friendly trails, while 31% were on expert trails. Surprisingly, the increase in the number of people who wear helmets hasn't resulted in fewer fatalities. Helmets are designed to protect riders at about 12 miles per hour, while a skier or a snowboarder who collides with a tree or another rider is typically going 25 to 40 miles per hour. The 3 videos you're about to see are of horrifying skiing accidents that can happen to anybody. Fortunately, all of the skiers in these videos survived.
Board. Nope. Okay. Oh shit!
By some miracle, all of these men went home with only broken bones. Number 4.
Sarah Jones was a camera woman who died at the age of 27 while on the set of Midnight Rider. She was struck by a passing train as the film crew desperately tried to remove the props from the tracks. There are 2 different videos capturing the moment, one from on board the train and one from the crew, capturing in higher quality the frantic moments just before impact as they try to pull the hospital bed off the tracks. This footage is definitely chilling, especially knowing how Sarah lost her life just seconds after the clip ends abruptly. As you can see in the video, the crew wasn't able to remove the hospital bed in time. When the train collided with the bed, it recoiled and struck Sarah, propelling her into the train, where she was struck and killed instantly. The filmmakers were attempting to shoot a dream sequence involving an actor playing Greg Allman, who was laying in the hospital bed placed on the train tracks. There were attempts to drop the scene from the movie, but director Randall Miller eventually proceeded with the now deadly filming. He was later tried and pleaded guilty to manslaughter, serving 2 years in prison. Number 3. There's an activity called zorbing, which involves a giant inflatable ball in which people strap themselves, then bounce down a ski slope or a hill, and presumably have a good time doing so. But imagine being stuck in said ball, tumbling down a hill, veering off the designated path, and rolling down the side of a mountain with absolutely no control. That's exactly what happened to 2 men in Russia in 2013 at the Dombai ski resort. The video you're about to see was filmed on a cell phone by a friend of the 2 men. It's truly horrifying to see the helplessness of the situation.
Держи его, блядь! Ох, блядь! О, нет! Как так-то? Да не укатится, нормально. Ох, блядь. Да, остановится и все. Об камень, давай об камень! Пиздец. Kim vardı içinde? Блять, а там чё внизу? Ебать. А кто это, чем вообще? Я не знаю, под...
At one point, you can see somebody manage to get in front of the ball and momentarily stop it, but unfortunately, that didn't last long. The ball tumbled down the mountain for almost a mile, slamming into rocks as it picked up speed. When the 2 men were found inside the ball, they were rushed to the hospital. One of the men, Denis Burakov, aged 27, injured his spinal cord and died on the way to the hospital. The other man, Vladimir Sherbakov, aged 33, suffered a concussion and deep cuts to his arms and face. Number 2. 2 men were out for a workout running in the Machitawan trails in Alberta, Canada.
Pausing workout.
When they had to pause the workout after being interrupted by an unwanted guest. A black bear emerges from the woods and begins closely stalking the 2 men, likely waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The 2 men wisely huddle closely together to appear bigger, as you can hear them say many times throughout the video, which proves to be successful in keeping the bear at bay.
That's it. That's as far as you're going. Stop. Stop. Right now. Stop. We can't. Get together. Get us together. We'll look bigger together. We can't, man. We can't. Just stay together. Stay together. We can't. Stay together.
There's an alarming amount of people who believe this bear was just being playful, when in reality over 90% of black bear encounters are predatory. This was more than likely not an experienced bear, and it was testing them to figure out if they would be worth the energy and effort to attack. If anybody should ever encounter a bear, never take it lightly or assume the bear just wants to be friendly, as that's almost never the case. Different kinds of bears call for different kinds of actions to be taken, for example, standing still like a plank or playing dead. Fortunately, the bear in this video eventually seemed to lose interest in the men, giving them enough time to make their escape.
Resuming workout.
Though it wasn't a good idea for them to start running away in such a close proximity to the bear. Had there not been two people in that encounter, that bear would have most likely attacked. Number 1. This is perhaps one of the most horrifying natural disaster videos you could find. Not only does it capture the horrifyingly destructive EF4 tornado, but it shows the horror that ensues for many people as their houses, cars, and whole towns are completely destroyed when they're trapped in the middle of tornadoes or other disasters. We can see at the start of the video it seems to be a very nice, wealthier area with nice looking houses in the background and a lot of green and open land. And in that same shot we see the tornado that's about to destroy it all. The man holding the camera then goes to comfort either his wife or daughter, and we see nothing but blackness, but listen as the tornado passes directly over the house, destroying everything outside.
Holy shit. Holy moly. Alright. Holy shit. Alright, I gotta go. I'm coming, honey. Shit, where you at, hon? God damn, it's bad. Alright, stay down, honey. Oh, shit, Josie. Uh-oh. We're gonna get some shit here, honey.
Is this gonna save us?
I hope so, buddy. Oh my God! Okay, honey. Holy shit! Stay in. Oh man! Oh! Shit!
Don't go out there.
No, not yet.
Don't.
Oh.
Stay here.
Oh my God, Josie.
You can feel the man's dread as he then has to go outside to see the damage.
Holy moly. Oh my God. Our house is freaking destroyed, Josie. Oh my God. I'm in shock. I can't believe this happened. Oh my God, Josie. The neighbors' houses are gone. Josie!
He then gets another shot outside from where he was at the beginning of the video and sees nothing but rubble for miles. This turned into this in only a matter of a minute. All those nice trees and houses you saw in the background are completely gone. It just goes to show you the true power of Mother Nature in a horrifying way, and that nature can always win.